morning, everybody. It is 9:01 a.m., bringing to order the Destination Improvement Committee. Let's see. We do have a quorum. Do we have any public comment on the items on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move forward. Oh, sorry. Good morning. Please come up to the microphone.
Good morning. My name is David Walton. I'm Beach Safety Director for the South Walton Fire District. I'm here to speak on a few ordinance items that directly pertain to the beach safety.
Mike's not on it.
I'm sorry? Am I speaking prematurely?
No.
You can speak now. It's an item on the agenda.
Okay. There was just, Chief, do you want me to speak to the flag issues?
The specifics, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see, I've got 1, 2, 3. I've got 3 issues.
Hey, David, can you give me a second?
Please state your name and spell your last name.
David Vaughn, last name V as in Victor, A-U-G-H-A-N, representing South Walton Fire District, beach safety.
Excuse me just a second. Andy?
Yes, sir.
I believe there was a pre-meeting request that we could change some agenda items around, and I believe what Dave is going to speak to would be part of that item we want to move up, which is a discussion about the beach codes. Do you think we ought to just go ahead and approve the minutes and then go straight into that discussion?
If that's okay with you, Mr. Vaughn.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Do you want me to have a seat?
I was not here at the last meeting. Has anybody had a chance to review the minutes? Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any from the public? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. New business.
How about the next one? July the next.
We'll,
Did you do them both at once?
we'll do the July minutes as well right now since we didn't. Mary Lou moves to approve.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor? Aye. Motion carried. Okay, now we're going to switch it around, and for Mr. Talbert, who's got to get to work, moving the new business, the beach, where was that?
Beach activities.
Beach activities.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I go, I'll defer to Mr. Kellenberger if he had any update on anything with regard to, we were asked as the committee to review the beach activities ordinance prior to the meeting, so if you want to... Yeah, let me preface the discussion to the audience understands what we're doing is Chief Talbert and David Vaughn, of course, have some municipal duties to take care of in preparation for this pending storm. So we want to move up the discussion that's under old business of municipal codes, chapter 22 and 23, up to the top of the agenda this afternoon, the South Walton Turtle presentation, and then Lee Moore's Coastal Dune Lake update will come after this. So every year we go through a code revision discussion and then take it before the larger or the upstream advisory committees of TDC and then on to the BCC for consideration and possible revision. So I asked everybody in this committee, as well as our sister beach management committee, to review the existing code, in particular codes that were changed last year, and offer up some comments, recommendations, or considerations that are viable and would be in line with making the code what I call more efficient. More efficient means easier to understand by the people that are being regulated and easier to enforce by the people that are charged with regulation. So at that point, we'll open it up for council or committee member discussion.
Do y'all want to let Mr. Vaughn go first, or do y'all want to get into this?
I'm sure his issues are probably the same as ours.
Yeah,
Let's go ahead, Mr.
let him
Vaughn.
go ahead.
Well, thank you for allowing me to speak to this and move us up on the agenda. We appreciate it very much. The first item that I'd like to address is on page 13 of the ordinances. I don't know if you have the copies in front of you, I assume. And that would be on page 13, that would be section 22.54 under the heading Authority to Close or Restrict Use of Beach and Water Bodies.
Oh, there it is.
Page 13. near the bottom of the page, under authority to close or restrict use of beach and water bodies. The South Walton Fire District would humbly request that the language includes the South Walton Fire District as we run the beach safety program, and we make the flag calls every day. When we determine that we need to go double red, we then inform the emergency management and Walton County Sheriff's Office. And we're currently not in the ordinance, and we just asked to be included.
So include the name.
We believe as the subject matter experts, it just makes
Including
sense.
the name of the South Walton
Fire District, yes ma'am.
Actually, for some background and clarification, this was brought up prior to the June meeting, and I know Mr. Kellenberger was to get with Sydney, county legal and staff to try to get some feedback on that. And that was really, just to echo what Mr. Vaughn's comments are, is we just feel like the title South Walton Fire District should be included in this, to codify this language, due to the fact that the Board of County Commissioners, the Director of Emergency Operations, County Sheriff's Office, this is a quote, shall have the authority to declare that emergency exists. We submit to you that if we, as the South Walton Fire District, have the authority to place double red flags and close the water, red flags which may restrict entry, or evacuate beachgoers from the beach for weather-related events, lightning, as well as other issues, such as, for instance, a building fire that threatens beachgoers as a result of smoke or actual fire exposure, should an SWFD be included in this language. Statutorily, the legislature, state legislature, promulgated specific authority to the SWFD to provide fire and rescue protection to the 84 square miles of Walton County, from county lines east to west and from the Bay to the Gulf of Mexico. So it's our submittal that we should be included in the language.
Thank you for consideration on that point. The next point I'd like to bring up moves us to pages 24 and 25.
Dave, let's refer by code number and section, because I believe that the one you're looking at has different page numbers than the ones we're looking at.
Okay, that would be section 22-60
Okay.
under sub 3C. And this is regarding vendors.
Page 25, top.
At the regional neighborhood.
Okay.
Yes, it begins at regional and neighborhood beach access zones leased, dedicated to, or maintained by the county or TDC must allow for a 10-foot corridor from the lifeguard towers to the water. I'd like to, as the director of beach safety, I'd like to submit that what we need is, because we have the 15-foot corridor for emergency vehicle accesses for TDC, Sheriff's Office, and for our lifeguards to traverse along the dunes edge, we'd like to have that 10-foot corridor just in the language to go backwards so that people can't set up behind the towers. We haven't had a problem, and we've kind of been enforcing that just by suggestion. It's codified that it goes from the lifeguard towers to the water, but we need that 10-foot corridor to extend backwards so that we can get our rovers to launch unimpeded or unobstructed to the emergency access lanes.
It's a safety issue.
Sure.
Makes
Makes
Safety
perfect
issue.
sense.
That makes sense.
So is it 10 feet all the way back to the toe of the dune?
Yes, ma'am. Essentially, it would, if you're looking top down, you would have your 15-foot corridor at the toe of the dune, a 10-foot corridor that runs through the lifeguard tower all the way through. And everyone's been very compliant with it, and we've suggested it. I just think it was just an oversight in the last drafting.
I might add too that all of the suggested language that's being brought up, we'll submit for the public record we have it to hand in.
Right.
For clarification.
Okay, and then the last thing I'd like to bring up on behalf of beach safety, or actually second to last, on page 25, in that vendor zone, what we've had a problem with in the vendor zones at the regional beach accesses where we have the 50% rule, where the public the vendors aren't allowed to set up on half of the beach. We have had a problem with some of the vendors moving our lifeguard towers. Our lifeguard towers aren't stationary. We like to keep, they're made of aluminum, and they weigh about 100 pounds, but they're pretty easy to move, and that's by design, so that in Irma situations, we can pull them off, move them as needed, move them forward as, But what we found is that, especially at Blue Mountain Beach is the example that we've dealt with several times last year and this year, is that the vendors will come out early and move our lifeguard towers left or right to maximize their vendor zone. And we'd like to suggest that maybe there's some language to include that any beach charity company or vendor who moves it would be subject to a fine. by code enforcement. I'm sorry, that would be sub 4. It could go on either sub
2264?
2260-4 on page 25, or there's two places that the language may be appropriate. Either it's sub 4 or it's sub 10, which would be on the next page. On sub 4,
Oh, yeah, gotcha.
the language where it may be germane would be all activities related to the business operation of each vendor must be confined within its assigned and designated area. And then it goes on to talk about the sea turtles, but I figure perhaps after that sentence, some language to include that confined areas, like I said, I don't have anything specific. I would need to talk to the county attorney about that, but that would basically impose some sort of fine or prohibit the vendors from moving the lifeguard tower. The other spot where that may be germane would be at sub 10 on the next page, where it says the beach vendors' operations are limited to no more than 50% of the public beach frontage at any public beach access, and that frontage shall be designated by the Walton County Tourist Development Council prior to May 1st of each year. And the way that it's worked so far is that TDC, the code enforcement guys, Jeff McVeigh in particular, has helped us with this. He's gone out there and he's had to move the tower back because what he does is the TDC's come up with a marker at certain spots, and they do alignments, and we set our tower there and we agree on it. And again, some of the vendors are coming out and thinking, you know, if we just move it 5-6 more feet, they can get 2 more sets in. And
If I could add, what it's causing is obviously what Mr. Vaughn's telling you, but it's a challenge for us that in some of these particular areas where it's inhibiting our guards from what their mission is to keep their eye on the water, and our beach patrons. They're ending up moving their tower, or they end up being arbiters with local residents and vendors and code as to what the rules are and all that. And, you know, I would never say nothing in our fire district's not our job, because we'll take on about anything, but it's really not within our mission, and it inhibits our guards from performing that mission. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
And the last thing I'd like to consider from looking forward kind of thing is I've noticed in my review, I'm on the beach management committee, so I'll be bringing up these issues with them as well. The last thing that I'd like to suggest that people consider, because my guards have been pulled in as the arbiters, and it's something that we're actually interested in from a search and rescue standpoint, is in the definitions on page 1 under aircraft, and also on section 2258 on that pertains to aircraft, is the emergence of drone technology or remote controlled, you know, the drones, the little. We're interested in using them for search, not necessarily to, you know, drop buoys or anything like that, but just to be able to spot rip currents and do things like that. And if we need to do anything unfortunate like a body recovery, we're in the process of talking with the SEC and what the governmental implications at the federal level would be for us. And that's something that's going to take a few more years to develop for us, or, you know, hopefully sooner than later. But I noticed that it's something that the Board of County Commissioners hasn't addressed yet, and I'd just like to suggest that you all consider that for future, both from our perspective and then also as the public has started coming out and we see individuals starting to use it, and beach patrons who have privacy concerns or just regulatory concerns, because we do have light aircraft that comes both military and civilian is flying over. We see that as an emerging issue, and we think that that's something that we may need to consider in the future. And that's all I have.
Mr. Chair, if you have questions, that we try to be glad to answer them. I also have a couple more recommendations for the ordinance, if you'd like.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, our fire marshal cannot be here. He's indisposed at the moment, but also in the ordinance on page 9 and 10, I think it's page 9, section 2254. It's under the subsection of fires in paragraph 2. The fire district, we feel like we should consider adding an end time to bonfires to the section of this ordinance. Currently, there's no language that states what time a bonfire should end. And most vendors we've spoken with have indicated they end their services with their customers between 10 and midnight. It would be our recommendation bonfires be extinguished somewhere between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. We'd be flexible with that, but either one would be, if something in that time frame would be suitable. By doing so, it would assist us with the following. It would potentially reduce the number of times fire pits are left on the beach and that are then discovered by turtle watch the next day that are still hot. By extinguishing the fire early, it could encourage customers to remove the fire pits off the beach when they leave instead of leaving them on the beach until their allotted time of 8 a.m. the next day. We think that change, that subtle change would help us and help us all coexist. So that's that one piece. The second piece for us is page 15. And I'm sorry, I don't have the section, but this is regard to where it talks about where there an event is taking place on the beach where they have to have a 20-pound class ABC extinguisher. We have a concern with that. The extinguisher, what we found is, you know, our mode is safety. So we look at fires and the dimension of fire and the size of that and go, hey, this would be very appropriate and, you know, reaches the, you know, optimum advantage to extinguish a fire should it happen. But what we found out is for a vendor or anybody to go obtain a 20-pound ABC extinguisher at Home Depot, Lowe's, or wherever, it's virtually impossible. You have to order that from a, you know, extinguisher company or whatever. So it makes it very difficult for them. We found the largest hardware store, one of our largest hardware stores, the 10-pound ABC is readily available, and it's at a probably a more nominal cost of $70. So it's our opinion that a 10-pound ABC would be more sufficient to combat the size generator proposed in the ordinance, which is listed in the dimensions, I think 24 by 12 by 18. I applaud you guys for being able to measure that, but that's the size. We think a 10-pound ABC extinguisher would be suitable for that, and it's more affordable. So, and I have in the attachment that I'll hand in for the record that demonstrates the difference in sizes of those extinguishers, and it's quite a bit of difference and easier to handle and get to the beach. Lastly, our last proposed item for consideration. Currently, there is no language that addresses grilling on the beach, at least none that we can find. We would propose adding language that would allow for small propane tailgate type grills. This would eliminate the large grills or tow behind larger charcoal grills that frequent our beaches. This in no way would supersede the no vending on the beach ordinance. It is our understanding that this is already unofficially being enforced. So by adding language, it would give code enforcement the official capacity to enforce this. Our more detailed language could be written, but requirements could be as simple as grills could not have a cooking surface larger than 225 square inches. Grills could only utilize 1-pound propane bottles, which if you're familiar with like camping or tailgating, that's pretty common. And no permit would be required. And we've provided an example of both and what they look like. We think that these are, would be something that would be from a safer point than people trying to bring down their true gas grills or whatever type of grills and wheeling them down to the beach, which has been found by the code and a lot of us. So those are some of the proposed items for consideration. Like I said, Mr. Chair, we appreciate you moving this up to the front.
Absolutely.
Some of the things we have going on. I have a copy of each, including Mr. Vaughn's notes, and I'll hand them to Stacy for the record. So if there's any questions that we can try to clarify for you now, or members of the public have, that we'll be more than glad to try to answer them.
Okay, well, that's quite a few things to run through. I'm sure we all have some additional things that we'd like to talk about, but for the sake of brevity in your schedule, let's go through these 7 real quick and discuss them as a committee, I guess, collectively or individually, whichever y'all wish. If there's any, including South Walton Fire District 2254, Section 4, I see no problem with that
Yeah, I agree.
in the code.
It makes
Anyone else
sense.
on the committee? Do we have a motion to recommend to the
I
TDC?
recommend.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second? We do have a second. Is it-
Made the motion,
Kate made a motion. Bob seconded it. Do we have any public discussion on adding South Walton Fire Department to 2254 for Section H1?
Question. It's been seconded, right? We're in discussion.
Correct, yes, sir.
Mr. Kellenberger, I know you said it 2 meetings ago that, and I saw, I attached that, the email to Sydney that you sent in June. Have we gotten any feedback on that?
Well, we got the feedback from Stan Sunday, County Deputy Administrator, that that particular item had been discussed, and that at the previous discussion, it was determined that South Walton Fire District, as lifeguard contractor, it would probably not be advisable to put them as a specific name in there.
Do we have that in writing?
Pardon me?
Do we have that in writing?
Yeah, I sent it back to you via email.
You did?
Yes, sir, I did. And
I don't have it.
it was in, after our previous meeting where we discussed it, pre-meeting, and then we discussed it in the meeting where I had admitted that I had failed to do it the meeting previous to that. I then did it and sent you back a response that was from the county administrative department of the reason why it was considered before and why it was not included before. And so, but I think what you brought up today is a little bit different, as in that your authority given to you by the taxing district that formed South Walton Fire District gives you certain responsibilities of life safety. So there's there's differences in what some of your functions are. In other words, you work as fire department under that taxing district, and you work as beach life safety under a contractual arrangement with the TDC. And so, while I agree that, and I'll be quite honest about it, isn't South Walton Fire District included in the beach closure discussions? I mean, so there's two different kind of closures. There's water closure, and then there's beach closure.
That's correct.
And so right now, EOC and Walton County Sheriff's Office and County Admin is what's listed as beach closure authority, but South Walton Fire District is included in those meetings, right? I mean, certainly as our lifeguard contractor.
In the instance of, say, using something that's relevant right now, a hurricane, through the Emergency Operations Center, through consult with the Sheriff's Department, Emergency Operations Center, and really it's a professional inform to county admin.
Right.
They don't make the decision. We should be clear on that.
Okay.
That we would close the beaches, bless you. We would close the beaches, not the water, the beaches, which
Right.
we've done for everybody's safety and well-being, whether it's
Right.
washouts, losing the dunes, walkovers, whatever. Anything outside of that, closing the water, has to do with regard to the water, but not just the water. It could be lightning, it could be any natural or man-made event.
Right.
What we're submitting to you in this language that we think it should be considered is, and from a legal standpoint, which we've got consult, that I hesitate using this word, but in this case it fits, we have the authority today that we could close that water.
Right.
We could direct people out of the water and off of the beach due to a natural or man-made event. So we're not asking so much just from a contractor point of view. This language is codified by the county that we are part of that response entity,
Okay.
emergency management, sheriff, code, whoever.
Right. And like I said, I'm not disagreeing on that. I just, our previous discussions, we had not differentiated between those two. Now with your differentiation between those two and what your regulatory authority is I think it ought to move forward through this committee. And then there will obviously be some other discussions at public meetings as well as with South Walton Fire District, County Admin, and County Legal Department. Because you're right, you do have a statutory authority given to you through that formation of South Walton Fire District. And right now, it's just not codified as part of county code. And so it needs to be discussed with admin and legal department as to how we get that done correctly. And so started that discussion in the email. Maybe the answer that was given did not consider all the facts, and it needs to be revisited. So we'll revisit that. But meanwhile, we'll move it through the committee.
Would you resend that legal opinion to this committee and then
Keep in
we'll
mind, it was
move forward?
it was an administrative opinion.
Oh, it wasn't illegal. Okay, well, I guess pending a legal opinion, do you have any problem with this motion going forward?
No, I don't have a problem at all. That's what I said. It ought to move through this committee as to what their, advisory advice on it is, and then we'll take it forward. But meanwhile, we'll run it parallel to make sure that when it gets to the decision-making process, it might not be a decision at all. It might be, yes, we got to do that because there's a statutory requirement through the formation of South Walton Fire Districts. What's the correct term of how South Walton Fire District was formed? I mean, it's a MSBU, right?
Incorrect.
Okay, how is it?
Promulgated by the state Florida statute as
Okay.
a special fire control taxing district. for
Okay.
84 square miles.
So it's a special taxing district?
Correct.
Okay.
Any further discussion on that?
Can we repeat the motion one more time?
To include South Walton Fire District in 22-54 subsection 4H1. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Seeing none, motion clears. The second one was 2260C that he brought up. Or what page was that on?
Page 24.
24.
Yeah.
This is where they're requesting a 10-foot corridor from the toe of the dune to the beach through the lifeguard station to get ATVs and emergency vehicles in and out.
Yeah.
As a retired lifeguard,
Yeah.
I see no reason why
Yeah,
that's
I
not.
second that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was
Okay.
just an oversight.
yeah.
Okay, so would you like to make a motion to this effect?
Do a motion to that effect.
Mary Lou makes a
And I
motion.
second that.
Kate seconds it. Any discussion on a 10-foot corridor from the dune to the water
No, back to the door of the.
Right,
oh,
yeah,
okay.
behind the tower.
through the lifeguard station, 10 feet wide, correct?
Yes, sir.
Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion clears. Last one he brought up was adding some language for fines for moving lifeguard towers. I can't imagine anybody doing that. But
I can't.
We got pictures.
Yeah, I got stories from this year.
I can.
I would say,
What's the fine level now for,
is there one?
No, it
Yeah,
would follow our regular,
It should be 50.
no, what's the,
That's
chief,
all.
what's the fine level for tampering with anything that has to do with the
With a
South
fire,
Walton
yeah.
Fire Department, whether it's a fire extinguisher, a truck, or what is it? Is
Well, we don't fine for that. That's
Is it
a
a-
code enforcement
Right.
issue.
it a arrestable
I
offense?
think,
to-
I
It's a
think the proper
third-degree
language ought
felony.
to.
Third degree
include-
what?
Felony.
I think that needs
If you're
to follow
inhibiting
to the
emergency
beach.
responder
Yeah.
from conducting their duties.
I don't think a
Absolutely.
fine is enough. If it's a third degree felony to tamper with fire district property
Absolutely.
outside the beach, it needs to be the same as on the beach.
Safety equipment, period.
That's pretty
Yeah.
cut and dry.
And there may be some existing criminal code or statute that covers it. There's certainly nothing under our area of purview, I say our beach code enforcement. But I would suggest the language include a little more broad as any kind of vendor zone or beach zone delineators. Because we have the same problem with the PVC posts we put out there for vendor zones. Those tend to move around a little bit too. We've got them all marked now, so.
How heavy are these lifeguards?
About 100 pounds, he said. About 100 pounds.
Yeah, they're not light.
Some of these beaches have multiple vendors on them, or this concern?
Yes,
We're going to get to that.
yes, sir.
So you're gonna run into the problem of who gets.
Identifying, correct.
Aren't the beach cams everywhere now?
Yeah.
No.
Drones.
Yeah.
There's your drone.
Can you electrify?
Okay, so, Brian, how would we go about getting legal to review what exact language we can put in if we wanted to carry through the criminal penalties for moving and obstructing, life-saving devices or
It'd be a
platforms?
simple request to the legal department to, is there any Florida statutes or county codes of criminal nature that involve moving, law enforcement or safety departments' equipment? I'm sure there is. There's got to be something.
Got to be.
So it's really, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Is the tower being moved, right?
And the
I mean,
vendor zones
we're not
being-
looking at a way to increase revenue or have a bit to cite somebody. We're trying to solve the problem of not moving the tower. And so what's the best way to do that? So let's think about.
There's-
Yeah, not a fine.
Suspend their vendor privilege
Yeah,
if they do.
consequences.
I mean, I would,
But once again,
Bad
Yes,
actor's
sir.
a bad
how do you
actor.
identify who did it?
we're,
Yeah.
there's going to be,
The kid that's working for him is gonna move the tower, so is he the one that's gonna get in trouble legally? And then the owner of the vendor services
Well, we-
is gonna
we-
replace him by that afternoon.
Yeah, now even though we do take enforcement action on the individual, it's tagged to the permitting company.
Okay.
Or the
Is
permitting
there a
company.
strike system that if they
No,
get?
right now, we have a permit revocation process through administrative review, and it's sort of broad as if you are in, yeah, it's on. It has language that says if you're in violation of these beach-related vending codes. So,
Have any permits been revoked this season?
none.
Okay.
So, once again, in all of action that we take, writing code is, we ultimately need to think, what is the end goal? And that is to stop the bad behavior. And so sometimes it's not necessarily code, sometimes it's how we, handle the situation. All right, so is there an opportunity to anchor the towers?
Kind of. We've been using, and what Jeff's has helped us with are the mobile home tie-down anchors. And that has its pros and cons. Leverage being, it's pretty easy to leverage out. It's more of a deterrent than an effective stop.
Right.
We have, at one point, we were using heavy chain and burying cinder blocks, and then burying it with a mound. And that can be a temporary solution sometimes. And again, we don't mean to say that we want to put it all on you, because we work very well with you guys on it. We simply want there to be some clarity for the vendors to understand that there will be consequences, and whether it's simply referencing a criminal code in the ordinance and just reminding them that it is part of their BCC codified part of the ordinance codification, that they're kind of on at least constructive notice, if not actual notice. We just think that there's a little lack of clarity that in the several instances that we've had to get Jeff and some of your guys involved. We just think that a clear-cut reference to some sort of enforcement or fine or consequence to the vendors, in addition to what they already are aware of,
Right.
would
Okay.
be helpful.
Okay, so what I think
So let's research what is available under criminal statute right now, okay?
that's what I'd like for.
And it may be as simple as some additional verbiage on the signage on the back of it. Tampering, moving this lifeguard stand could result in criminal penalties under section blah, blah, blah.
Bingo.
Right.
So we don't need to make a motion and move forward on that. We're going to get legal review and come back.
Right.
I say not can result, but will result.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Enforcement is all. If you don't enforce the laws, we don't get any results.
So do we need to, somebody want to make a motion to that
Make
effect?
a motion to, investigate existing opportunities to prohibit or minimize this behavior.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on that item? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Okay, drones. Personally, I'd like to add something to this. With the completion of 4 snorkel reefs within 600-700 feet of the beach, extending out another 300 or so feet, the able to put an eye in the sky in case something were to go awry is a good thing. I think should be allowed. We fly drones all the time out there. The visual is pretty fantastic of what's on the reefs now, and you can see everything just by a few hundred feet up. Technology today, they're very inexpensive. It would be something that I think would be foolish to not allow the fire department to have access to that type of technology for life-saving opportunities. So do we have a motion to allow for the fire department to have drones?
I think that we ought to make a motion to include language that allows drone usage per FAA rules and regulations.
Is that FCC?
Because that's who ultimately governs drone activity right now.
Absolutely. I mean, and there are zones where you're not going over 400 feet or the thing will shut down. So it's.
There's also differentiation between recreational use and commercial use, use by
Public
municipalities.
Safety, yeah.
And all that. And so I think that by referencing the FAA rules and regulations would put us in the position to allow drones or disallow drones where appropriate.
I just see that there's nothing in the code, in any of the ordinance that addresses this, and it's,
Right now, the way that the code is written, it would be extremely hard to enforce because state and federal rules and regulations supersede county ordinance. But once again, this appears to be something that was put in there because probably somebody landed a seaplane and pulled it up on the beach and somebody complained. And so they said no planes.
Just a word for the future. One of the rising trends in our country is just burgeoning is drones that are equipped with signage, advertising signage that they fly
Ticker
around.
tape.
It hangs from the drone. So that'll be something we'll probably be dealing with in the next year or two.
Lovely.
Yeah, I would think the FAA requirements is certainly something that we would want to consider inserting,
Yeah.
or it should be considered, but
Yeah.
I think maybe the start is that it's confined to public safety.
Yeah.
That,
One of the biggest problems is our whole beach area is a restricted fly zone because of Eglin Air Force Base. So if you follow FAA guidelines, you should be filing a flight plan with Eglin Air Force Base Tower. Even, well, if you're commercial, if you're recreational, you stay below 400 feet. I'd have to research that some more, but I do know that if you're if you're flying it as a commercial enterprise, you're supposed to have what's called the Part 107 pilot's license, which is basically the ground school portion of getting a pilot's license. It's a test you take and then you get a FAA certification. So, you know, as a county, you can get, you're required to get it as well. You get what's called a COA, which is actually a waiver, so that you're allowed to fly in certain areas. Most people get it for their entire municipality. We have different departments that have drones right now. We're working on getting our Part 107. We do not fly our drone right now for any use. We just have it. And Josh and I are in the process of getting our Part 107. And then the county will apply as a whole for all the different departments that are acquiring drones for what's called their COA. Certificate of Authorization, which is actually a waiver.
So do I have a motion to seek the appropriate language to insert in the code regarding fire department flying drones per FAA regulations?
I so move what you exactly just said.
if I could add just a friendly amendment that it would be public safety, not just fire department.
Yes.
So the sheriff's department and ourselves.
The proper
Not
language.
Yes.
And for the proper departments to fly drones.
That's what I say, is there's already language in the FAA rules and regulations, who is the ultimate authority anyway,
Just
of
insert it in.
how people do it. So I would recommend that the motion say that the language be changed to reflect FAA rules and regulations. So it could be as simple as drone use, or, you know, once again, I don't know about how the county or other people above us feel about airplanes, seaplanes, helicopters, and all that. But there ought to be a section that said drone usage per FAA.
Or unmanned aerial vehicle?
There you go, UAS.
Is there a 400-foot limit out over the water?
It's 400 feet, yes, sir, in this area because of Eglin.
Well, the minimum altitude over the water for aircraft is 500 feet.
Correct, that gives
1,000
100
feet
foot.
over the beach. Over the water, 500, over land, 1,000, up and down.
Well, that's all per FAA regulations. So that's going to dictate this zone.
There's any requirement to contact Lakeland to fly a drone.
Commercially, there is. If you're doing it as a commercial enterprise, if you're going to take aerial pictures for a realtor or something like that nature, that's a commercial activity and would require the permitting process that Brian was speaking of. This is not. This is life safety.
If you look
issues.
at FAA maps, the area we're in is a restricted flight zone for all aircraft. And since a UAS is considered an aircraft, you technically have to file a flight plan with Eglin Air Force Base. Now, people,
The PFR corridor that runs up and down the beach, all the way to Panama City and all the way to Pensacola.
Who does?
It's a PFR corridor. There's an east-west corridor and a north-south corridor.
okay,
That require, you don't have to be on the radio.
I'm just going by what I've learned in
Tangent. Squirrel.
seminars associated with flying UASs. And so if you look at a map, our beach is what's called a restricted flight zone. I'm not a pilot, just saying that what I've learned is that according to FAA rules, if you're in, there's different flight restricted areas. There's type G, type A, B, C, and D, and it has to do with proximity to airports and of course military installations. And if you look at one of those maps, it shows that our whole beach is a restricted flight zone. You're right. There are corridors that go. There are corridors within that area that allow general aircraft aviation, but according to that map, they're still supposed to be in contact with Eglin Air Force Base tower.
No flight plans.
Maybe flight plan is not the correct word, but once again, not authority on it. That's why I say that if we're going to deal with 2258, it ought to have some general language as in compliance with FAA.
Exactly.
rules.
So we have, Mary Lou made a motion to include language in 2258 regarding UAF flight for life safety issues by the county. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Does anybody want to discuss it further, whether there's commercial or not? I mean, flight plans or not? Just, I think it's a good thing to include.
I think it's not a problem.
Okay. Any discussion from the public? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Motion approved. Okay, Rick brought up fire pits on the beach and the time at which they can be extinguished. Presently, there is not any language that states a time for those things to be out. I mean, I see the point, but at the same time, I mean, who's to dictate how long somebody stays out there?
Well, it's not somebody, it's the fire, right?
Yeah,
Chief, were you suggesting fire pit fires or any bonfire?
Any bonfire.
anyone?
This is going to include private beaches.
Yeah, any bonfire that's permitted by the fire district, what we're saying is there's no language in there that really says where it ends. So you receive a permit and we would be able to change our brochure and messaging and instructions to those that obtain the
And
permit, that it would have to be extinguished by a certain time.
And you feel the benefit based on fire department's experience would be that it would hopefully alleviate some of the leaving of the debris or whatever overnight?
That's one of the largest issues is debris and hot fire pits. And, I know from a Turtle Watch standpoint, they're never going to send us Christmas cards with regard to bonfires. I know they don't like them, but we try to coexist. And that, we feel like we try to do what we can to coexist and make that we listen. And that's some of what we've heard by our folks that are walking the beach and everything. They observe these and they're hot and it can be dangerous. So right now, technically, you just have to remove that by 8 a.m. We think that would, we're willing to take a shot at that to see. We think that may change that where people have the ability to take them off the beach before 8 a.m. So it'll eliminate some of that.
So if they're so hot, when the turtle walkers walk over them, did they report that to you and you look up to see who got the permit and those people will never have a permit again?
Anything that's reported to us that we're able to go back and research, we generally are able to, more than 90+% of the time, obtain where the bonfire was, if it was permitted.
Okay.
We don't have that many illegal, but if it was permitted, to find out, and then we speak to them directly, and if we can't get compliance, or we give them a time frame where they need to go down and correct whatever it is, that includes debris on the beach, they are put on a list where they lose that privilege to have a bonfire. There's no strikes, there's no anything like that. That's when it's reported to us. Most of the time it's not reported to us. We get it third, fourth hand by voice, by social media, by, hey, what I saw, there's no exact location, so it makes it very difficult for us to know.
So the fire pit by the present code says you've got to have the pit off the beach by 8 a.m. and the fire completely extinguished.
Yeah, and the reason for that is it was trying to prohibit people from dumping hot ashes. Okay? The general practice now, I believe, by vendors is that most of them do cut it off by 10 o'clock. And I believe most of them do remove their pits that night because they extinguish it with a water source. Usually, 5-gallon bucket full of water they've obtained from the beach walkover shower or, gallon jugs of something. And so we support this in that we would like to see the pits removed in the evening when they're done with them. Because the general complaints we get when they're left the next day is that it's a pit that has been forgotten.
Could
Or
be
the-
10, could be 10:30 or 11, whatever, if the committee wants to consider that. We just came up with, just for discussion, sometime between 10 and 11 PM, our recommendation would be.
Another thing, a point of consideration is that driving on the beach during turtle season is restricted after 10 p.m. So in the places where people are allowed to drive on the beach, Grayton Beach and Inlet Beach, they're not allowed to do that after 10 p.m. due to their headlights and the ability to interact with turtles during the turtle nesting season from May to October. So it's a good suggestion, and I think it would help, resolve some of the issues with bonfires, and I don't think any vendors would have any issues with it.
Sounds like 10 o'clock.
I'd go for midnight, out and off by midnight. I mean, 10 o'clock's early.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm not even sure the time matters as much as just the getting it off the beach when you're done. I mean,
I
Well-
do my best to convince them to stop it at
Yeah.
10. My employee has to be back at work at 6 a.m. in the morning, and they don't want to get off that beach until midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock.
I say 10 is good.
who is that? Who's that? Sir,
What's your name for the?
what's your name for the record?
Dave Meadows.
Dave Meadows with La Dolce Vita is one of our larger vendors, runs a good operation, and so I inquired with him as what's his standard operating procedure with bonfires. What I've seen on the beach, bonfires that I've attended, is that they usually cut them off at 10, sometimes earlier than that.
If it's a company doing it, what about individuals? I mean, Mr. Meadows, come on up.
Thank you. Dave Meadows, Meadows. Our procedure on the bonfires is we follow what the code is, and the code says you have to get off the beach 8 a.m. in the morning. Problem that we run to in the morning is, so we shut down a bonfire at 10, 11 o'clock, midnight, 1 o'clock, whatever the case may be. That fire's still simmering at 8 o'clock in the morning. We've also found it where people have drugged the pit back out, put more wood in it, and kept burning it, and then dumped it, because it wasn't my guy. It wasn't me, because I've broken down bonfires before. It's too hot to remove from the beach. We do provide gloves to our guys, but then where do you take that fire pit? Put it in the back of the truck, melts the bed, whatever the case may be. So it takes a while for that thing to cool down. And if you pour a 5-gallon bucket of water on it, it overflows from the pit into the sand, turns the sand black. So it's a pain, period. But we don't promote bonfires. We do them. Our guests ask for them, but we don't advertise it. We charge more money than anybody else does for a bonfire, so the majority of the people don't go with us. But that's what the other guys are doing dirt cheap, and they'll do them 4 or 5 times a night, and they're all over the place. So, that's our procedure on it.
Thank you. I would, I hate to make regulations on regulations and regulations. I'm just not, I'm into, personal freedoms and enjoy the beach at your own will. I get it. I think having everything still going up until 8 a.m. is not the best thing. But 10 o'clock is just early at night. I would say, it would be my recommendation or my thoughts that the fire pit and the fire has to be extinguished by midnight, out and off the beach. Figure it out. If you put it out at 10, takes till 12 to cool down, no problem. If you wait till 12, you're going to be using water. I don't think wood is a big problem. It seems to be biodegradable, and the sand will color back white when it rains. So, but I think 10 o'clock's too early and wouldn't be in favor of 10. Any others? How do you feel about that?
No comment. No, I think I'll follow on what you said. It is personal freedom. our beaches are getting more crowded, and it's a privilege to have that bonfire on the beach. In days gone by when you could just have one and enjoy your personal freedoms, I'm not against personal freedoms, but I'm just saying it's becoming harder and harder where, again, we may find ourselves where we have to restrict bonfires, period, more and more, where one day we'll all be sitting here going, remember when we used to be able to have bonfires? That's where this may be heading. That's not a threat, that's a reality of what we're dealing with out there. And I'm asked all the time, well, who's more out of line, the vendors or it's both. Because everybody's challenged with what they're trying to do. They're trying to do the right thing. Most cases, everybody's trying to do the right thing, but it's difficult. So I hear what you're saying about restricting the time. And, you know, if we want to recommend midnight that you have to have it done and off, you know, we don't like a lot of regulation either. We'll try it. If it doesn't work, we can come back and say, you know what, we tried that and we need to adjust this.
Well, you're on the ground, Chief Talbert. What does going from 10 to midnight lose from a safety, turtle, whatever? What do we lose by doing it at midnight versus 10?
I think, you know, we used 10 to 11 as a guideline. We felt like after, you know, we went out and asked vendors, and what the vendors told us was they try to get them off the beach by between 10 and midnight. So I can't really tell you if we're gonna lose anything other than it's gonna provide us the ability, or all of us, to be able to see people pull that stuff off the beach, which may make it better for us in the morning. So we can try that.
Or 11 as a compromise. I mean,
we're open.
Any further discussion on what time bonfires have to be out and off the beach? I mean, I think 8 a.m. is too late. I think having a hot fire even past midnight is not reasonable. But I don't want to put any burdensome regulations on people. 10 o'clock is just early. I mean, I'm from New Orleans. I mean, you're just getting started.
yeah, you can go party somewhere else after you've had your nice bonfire experience.
Yes, ma'am. Come on up.
You don't have to quit partying.
Valerie
Depends on the
Lofton.
moon. Ma'am?
Valerie Lofton, Lofton. So you're saying bonfires off the beach, this is what you're proposing, by 12 o'clock, like they're gone, they're moved, we won't have to walk up on any hot fires in the mornings when we're doing our turtle watch?
That's
Is that
what I
right?
understand.
I'd say, yes, ma'am, out and off the beach by midnight.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear on that. All right.
What are your thoughts, Valerie?
No bonfires at all on the beach. I think off the beach is fine, but, you know, with an endangered species and with, I don't know if you guys know, but we've had a record year. We're at 126 nests now, because I found another nest this morning that hatched that we hadn't marked, that we had missed during a rainstorm or whatever. So, yes, walking up on hot fires in the morning just definitely concerned me before. Just the vision of a mother sea turtle coming up and running into or over hot coals, and then having to sit around Gulf World and be healed, and someone else has to foot the bill for that, for all that healing and the time and the volunteers that are over there, and the paid employees that aren't paid very well. All of that comes into play with having a hot fire left on the beach overnight because someone comes to town for a week and wants to have a good time. Those are my thoughts. So having it off the beach by 12 o'clock, completely gone, thrills me. So I hope it does pass.
I just think we should make it, thank you for that input. I just think I should make it clear that what we suggested was that it's our recommendation that bonfires be extinguished between 10 and 11, and now we're proposing possibly midnight, and we felt like that could potentially reduce the number of fire pits that are left on the beach that are then discovered by Turtle Watch the next day that are still hot. Right. So I just want to make sure I'm clear from the fire district's point of view. That's what we were proposing, that you might encounter a fire pit, but it wouldn't be hot. That's what we're shooting for.
That's exciting.
Very
exciting, because we do run into hot fires all the time.
Absolutely.
So we don't, we complain about it between ourselves, but we feel like we have no power to do anything else about it because someone said it can stay out there till 8 a.m. So I'm thrilled about a change.
If I'm understanding, the sentiments of the committee, I would think that we modify the chief's proposal to say that the fire has to be out and off the beach by midnight.
By midnight.
Period.
So it has to be
I mean,
extinguished before.
I don't care when you put
Right.
it out. I
If
don't
we're
think it's
ready, if we're ready, I'll make that motion.
Yeah, I agree.
out and off the beach by midnight.
Right.
Yep.
And then if from
Cold.
them experience for a year or two, there are valid reasons that to move it up to 11 or 10, we can discuss that, or y'all or whomever's doing this
starting
at the
point.
time.
Yep.
Then, but
Good start. I have a motion from Lee. Do I have
I
a second?
second.
A second from Kate. Mr. Tusa.
Thank you, Andy. Jay Tusa, Executive Director, Walton County TDC. One quick thing as we're talking about this, we're talking about extinguishing fires and the pits being off the beach. And I mean, obviously there needs to be time for these pits to cool before they're removed off the beach. So, if we're saying midnight, then you really need to back this time up a little bit, probably to where you're looking at probably 10 o'clock time frame to extinguish a fire. So it's cool enough to where you can get it off the beach. And Andy, I do have some concerns about, extinguishing these fires and how that's going to be done in a time frame that these will be cool enough to be removed off the beach by midnight. I mean, if you pour water on there, is that going to make a big mess and get into the sand? I mean, our beaches are what makes us so special and unique, and we can't, and the volume of fires that we have every single night, we can't have dirty embers and, ash all over the beach from these bonfires. So I think there probably needs to be a protocol set up of how the fires are extinguished and at what time they're extinguished and then what time the pits need to be removed. Just my opinion.
But presently, there is no regulation on the ash or the hot coals or the embers and what happens to them now with the fire pit.
And we have problems from that from time to time.
Actually, there is information from when you come get a fire permit from the district, you're given a brochure or you fill that out online. It's amount of information that you're given that what you're required to do with those and how to properly dispose of it. We're currently working on right now some informational videos for just public dissemination, but also a short video for a vendor or anybody else to watch prior to obtaining the permit or being able to obtain a permit.
I'm not familiar with that process, Chief. Can you explain that just very quickly, the process for extinguishing the fire? I mean, is that done with an ash can? Is it done with water? What's the process?
It's done a lot of different ways, I think. Some bring an ash can, some extinguish them with water, some just go out, get a pail with Gulf, out of the Gulf and extinguish it with water there. And they try to minimize the mess. Some of it, where there's spillover, I think they cover it up with sand. Others where you'll see a trail of embers, you can almost follow it back to where the truck went, where they're heading to. I mean, it's a little bit of all those things, but we try to provide them some helpful, safe tips on how to properly extinguish that to minimize the impact.
What are your numbers? Like, how many permits do you give out on an average week?
About 1,300 plus a year we're doing right now.
So it's a lot. It's a huge volume.
It's a lot.
So I just think we need to have a system in place, and it sounds like we already have that to an extent. But I just think if we're going to put this in place, we probably need to examine the timeline to make sure it works according to what we're proposing. If we're saying get off the beach, to get the pit off the beach by midnight, just make sure they have enough time before that midnight deadline to do so.
Yeah.
Do we limit the number of bonfires per night?
We limit the amount of bonfires per access.
Okay.
And that's an ever-evolving process for us with TDC as well, because we've talked about limiting the period. We've discussed it, as we head in towards, well, I don't really know what the off-season is anymore. I don't think we have that. But at the end, kind of the end of the traditional season, if that's safe to say, what we always try to do from a continuous improvement process, get ourselves in the room, then we'll talk with TDC, we talk with members of Turtle Watch, and we talk about what occurred over the year. And for us, I think what we're looking at is we are exploring the possibility of limiting bonfires, not just in neighborhood access, it's just per night, per day. We saw this prolific number of nests this year, that type of thing. So we're looking at all that.
What's the cost of a bonfire permit?
It's $50 for the permit.
And that's paid to?
That's paid to the fire
district.
Commercially, it's the $50 permit plus whatever the commercial
Event
enterprise
fee
wants
is.
to do.
Can we raise the permitting price?
We've considered it. We've considered it
It's been $50 for a long time,
Yeah.
since I've lived
for
here.
10 years.
I think 200, I wouldn't pay $200 for a bonfire.
People pay more than that.
I don't see any reason to regulate people out of having fun and having a bonfire on the beach. I mean, and I don't see any reason not to disagree with you, Jay, but I don't know why we couldn't put in the language or the permitting process. It's advised that you put it out at this time, but just be acknowledging that you have to have all this stuff off the beach, rechange the permitting thing by midnight.
Yeah.
They can figure it out. I mean,
Yeah, I just wanted to
They can.
bring
There's gotta
that
be an
to your
age limit
attention
to
as you're
do-
discussing
Bonfires.
this.
That's-
Is there an age minimum to get a permit?
no, we don't
factor.
want to create mess.
What is it, 18?
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, we're not gonna let a minor get a bonfire permit.
So if you're 18 to get a permit, you're smart enough.
What's the age for somebody to drive a golf cart, man? Do you know?
It's like
We
60.
advise people. Same thing, man. You're advising people to do things and they put up more signs. Go ahead. See what happens.
That's another one.
Get some more signs.
Yeah.
So Lee made a motion to have everything out and off the beach by midnight. Kate seconded it. Mr. Toosa's got some concerns. Do we want to modify? Or, sorry, Mr. Meadows?
Yeah, just one recommendation.
Come on up, buddy.
You got it. Sorry.
In the ordinance and the way that we get our permits, we're even in the permit. I mean, our company would be willing to buy the ash can and have the ash can on site. If you have that on site, you dump it into the can, and it's easier to remove without the chance of burning your hands off the pit. So maybe something like that, just adding some extra little steps in there, because that's the best way to do it, because everybody goes out there and pours water and it just spills everywhere. So maybe having that can required, I mean, it's a cheap item to add to your bonfire. So
Do you rent the rings?
now you can get it at Ace, you can get it at Home Depot, Lowe's, anywhere has them. Just an aluminum can, small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have.
No, I mean,
Just-
but
I
that's
mean,
part-
it
that's part of our-
falls
that's part of what
lockstep
we
with the leave no trace.
Correct. We're wanting to keep our beaches clean, and us
Correct.
as a vendor want to keep, our business, in line with everything. We don't want people saying, "Well, there's the vendor again, leaving ashes all over the place."
Yeah.
And as long as we have the tools in place to make sure that we clean up after ourselves, that'd be great. So I'm in favor
would
of
you-
that being implemented.
Thank you, Mr. Meadows. Would you consider modifying your motion
Yes.
to say all debris, ash included from the fire, must be removed by midnight?
I'd like to let y'all know that 2254B2 reads, "It shall be unlawful and a violation of ordinance for a person to fail to clean up after the fire has been extinguished." So I would also recommend that you try to make the codes as easy to understand and easy to enforce. And so it's probably best to write the code in very simple forms and let the means and methods be determined by the people that are doing the activity. If you try to regulate how they exactly do the activity, you're getting yourself into a position that makes it hard to understand and hard to enforce, and also able to create loopholes. But if you have a simple statement of all fires need to be extinguished and off the beach by a certain time, then they will have to figure out how
Figure it out.
far they have to back up to actually do the extinguishment, the process for doing the extinguishment in order to not get embers out onto the beach and stuff like that.
And that can all be a recommendation on the permit that. he was
Certainly,
talking
the
about,
permitting authority
the
can offer
brochure you give out.
recommendations that work, best management
Yeah.
practices.
Yeah.
But, once again, code is meant to regulate behavior in a broad form, not in the particulars of it. When you start doing that, we have found that it's very hard to enforce.
Does the code actually say clean up?
Code says, "It shall be unlawful and a violation of the ordinance for a person to fail to clean up after the fire has been extinguished." And so that's the section of code we use when we find embers on the beach or logs, obviously where somebody just dumped the fire out and took their pit to the house.
Well, I'd say clean up is open to interpretation. I mean, my idea of cleaning up might be completely different from someone else's. I would just say remove all remnants of the fire from the beach.
By midnight.
Right.
By midnight.
Fire, equipment,
Yeah, all remnants,
everything.
everything.
Who's going to enforce this at midnight on the beach in the dark?
That's a good question.
We're out until 12:30
Do you feel like that this change would just create more people to leave the remnants on the beach versus
Most of the enforcement
letting it
action-
cool off and just taking the whole thing off in the morning?
Now, most of the enforcement action that we take from people not following the bonfire rules and regulations is done after the fact. In other words, we'll find the pit, we'll find remnants on the beach. We have a great information exchange with South Walton Fire District as to who is permitted and where they're permitted. And so it's pretty easy to pinpoint who did it. The ones we can't are the unpermitted bonfires. But as you can imagine, they're unpermitted. So
It's
there's,
illegal in the first
unless you
place.
catch them in the act. Now, we check probably 75% of the permitted bonfires. Okay, so we're hitting most of them. So we have, and we often will typically catch the unpermitted bonfires, and then the ones that don't behave like they should by leaving their buckets or whatever, or not cleaning up completely. We catch them after the fact. We share information with the chief. They can choose to restrict the permits to have vendors if they choose. It's not our position to do that because we're not the permitting authority. And so the system's working good now. I agree that leaving them out to 8 o'clock leaves some area open. I don't particularly like a unattended hot bonfire pit. So I'd like to see them extinguished before they leave. I'd like to see them remove their pit before they leave. But, I don't want to get into the means and methods of how they do that and write code to do that. I'd rather just say pits, fires have to be off the beach by whatever time y'all think's appropriate. And then let them figure out the means and methods of doing it.
Couldn't think that's where we are. So I have a motion and a second to have the fires out and off the beach by midnight. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. Okay, fire extinguishers changed from the 20-pound to the 10-pound, 22-54, Section 8.
Yeah.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Approved. The grills. No.
I don't have any desire to.
I have no
allow-
appetite to
As long as they clean it up.
Just fix your food before you get
Currently,
there.
I'll just-
currently right now, the
Go
way
ahead.
we enforce this is that we consider a regular charcoal grill an open flame. And so there's verbiage in there about open flames needing a permit. We have decided as a interpretational effort that a gas grill that we consider a tailgate gas grill is using the 1-pound bottles is not an open flame, and therefore we don't mete out enforcement action on it in conjunction with the bonfire section. Okay? Now,
So-
I think there is some need to have that codified so that it's just not an interpretation by our department. And I think what the chief has proposed is pretty simple.
Well, what are the regulations about food prep on the beach, period? Forget about bonfires.
come on.
I think it's
There's a blanket statement that says no vending of food or beverage on the beach.
So,
Just no vending.
so it goes back to what I think Mr. Kellenberger said before about the relationship between a code and their ability for it to be understandable, for them to be able to manage that. It shouldn't have to always be enforced. It should be educating, and then possibly some enforcement. But also the logic behind what you're trying to achieve and enjoying the freedom of what, okay, so you do a commercial bonfire or just a permitted bonfire, and people are cooking s'mores over top of that bonfire. Is that cooking food?
Yes, but
That's food. But if you're
We're for-
doing that, the grill, the differentiation is that you have folks that bring those small Coleman grills, which that's an open flame. You can call it what you want, it's an open flame,
Yeah.
but it's manageable, it's small, it's contained, it's a small footprint. You have people, any of us have been to Grayton Beach, you hear this loud banging noise and it's a truck coming across the beach with a large commercial gas grill on
That's
the
nuts.
back of it with propane bottles rolling around, or a gigantic smoker, so I think for their ability,
Yeah.
what is permitted or what's allowed and what is not allowed.
I'm not a fan of cooking on gas at all unless you're in the kitchen. I think if you're going to grill, you grill with charcoal. So the small Yetis, the small Colemans, I mean, the things that you can buy at the convenience store, I can't, for the life of me, imagine banning those from going out on the beach.
Well, actually, they're a huge safety concern, because what happens to it at the end of the afternoon? They dump the coals into the sand.
Right. And then
And so
somebody
that's the
sets fire.
reason why
Some kid picks
grills,
it
charcoal grills are considered an open flame. And right now, internally, we've determined that gas grills of appropriate size are not an open flame. When I'm making that distinguishment, it's because that's how we do it in the code. In other words, we have to apply a code to any type of enforcement action we do. We can just do beach ambassador work where we tell people that this is a good beach etiquette thing, but code enforcement people like to have a strong written code.
Yeah, there's no
And
language. There's no language right now.
Right, there's no language right now. So the other thing is that charcoal grills also tend to turn into bonfires after they've cooked hamburgers. Not uncommon to see a Weber full of 1.5-foot logs after the hamburgers have been cooked. And then it's a grill, man. Well, yeah, it's a grill, but you got a bonfire going on it. And,
So ticket them for not having a bonfire permit.
We do. But what we'd like to do is have ability to stop it before it starts. Okay, so and we do right now because we consider charcoal grills bonfires. Chief's made a valid point. We don't want to restrict people from being able to cook a hamburger and a hot dog on the beach if they want to do it with the appropriate device. We feel
Force them to use gas. I mean, come on, Brian.
Or you restrict it to like we said, the 225 square inches where that grill is only a certain size. I mean, that may be a consideration as well. Look, this is what we know is you guys are put on the spot. I'm put on the spot as a resident of this community that I'll be on the beach. Hey, Chief, I get the Chief question. Hey, Chief, is it okay if I do? Well, it doesn't say anything anywhere.
Right.
That you can or you can't. And it needs to be, we have a city and county commissioner that has spoken right from this dais that said, I like what code does and everything, but I'd hope that doesn't upset my birthday party where we have a cookout on the beach.
Yeah.
So we're trying to help all of ourselves here that, okay, so what's permitted? Are we permitting that only? I'm trying being facetious here. Or are we trying to create something that's a little clearer for you guys and everybody to enjoy the beach?
Sooner or later, we have to understand that all things aren't appropriate on the beach. Okay,
I agree. I agree.
So, I'm a Weber guy. I cook over charcoal at my house all the time. But if I go to the beach and I want to cook a hamburger or hot dog, I have a small gas grill that I take.
Yeah.
And the reason is because I have seen it in person, Andy. They get done cooking, there goes the charcoal. I've seen them dump it in Western Lake Outfall. And I'm like,
I have too. And I spend my entire beach going existence on Grayton Beach. So, and I am guilty of having a barbecue grill that is charcoal on the back of the tailgate and have cooked burgers and chicken thighs and all kinds of fun stuff. I'm not for
that wasn't under a
regulating
10 by 10 tent, was it?
No, I don't own a tent, Brian. look at my face.
I need to meet with you after the meeting.
I'm all about creating and codifying some form of language about what you can and can't do with a grill. Sorry. A 225 square inch grill, what is that? 36 inches in diameter?
Yeah, it's not real.
I mean, I'm all for saying that, and I see you, Cliff. I'm gonna get to you in a second. But I go to Grayton Beach. That's where we beach, and I mean, I literally would be tarred and feathered if I said you can't bring your little Yetis down there, and I was supportive of that. I mean, I'm not. That's what we do.
Okay.
I just can't imagine regulating that out of the equation.
Can you get a bonfire permit and take your Weber?
$50 to go grill on the beach every single time? No.
I don't know. I think as the committee, you probably ought to, at this point, follow Robert's Rules of Orders and continue on if a motion gets floated and seconded and then voted on, and then it either moves or doesn't.
Let's hear Cliff. Come on.
I'm sorry.
Good morning.
Morning.
Cliff Nauer, 110 Golf Club Drive. Lived here 22 years or so. I'm probably a huge violator because for the last 8 years, I tow a 1,500-pound grill down to Grayton Beach to feed all the kids at Kids Fishing Day once a year. And so I donate all the food. I feed probably 300 kids and at least 200 adults every time I do it. And so I would think it would be terrible to not be able to do that one day a year. There is no food for anybody to eat down there during Kids Fishing Day unless you bring your own stuff. And so I've donated it for the last 8 or 9 years, and I would hate to not be able to do that in the future. And it's if you've never been there before for Kids Fishing Day, it's packed, and there's tons of kids getting experience fishing that never have an opportunity to otherwise do so. So that's my 2 cents.
As a co-founder of the organization, it's the CCA, Coastal Conservation Association, and literally we give out around 150 rods and reels and beach fishing setups for children. And it's a super cool program. Cliff, thank you so much, obviously, for doing that as well as you've done. So, I can see a special events permit for something like that. No problem. Just your average Joe grilling some burgers on the beach. I mean, I can't get behind saying that it's going to go for gas, but I'll listen to any motion that any committee member wants to make.
Are we talking about the people that drive their vehicles to the beach? Because they're
Anybody.
The ones that cook out there. Are we talking everybody that goes to
Everybody.
the beach?
Everybody.
These little hibachi grills out to the water and cook from...
The code's for everybody.
Okay.
And when you do this, what do you do with the ashes? You drag them back off the beach with you?
Yes, sir. The grill just slides right back in the back of my truck.
So it comes down and it leaves and there's no trace.
I think, yes, sir.
I think most of the locals do that, in my opinion. Because I have a little magma grill off my sailboat that we put on the back of the Jeep.
Mm-hmm.
And we use charcoal. I mean, I'm afraid to say that, but we do use charcoal on the beach. But we take it home.
So,
That's a tough one.
what do you think, Lee?
I have been going to the beach since I was probably 3 years old. We have never even thought about cooking. I mean, there are sandwiches. You can buy chicken fingers. You can get, there are so many, and it's easier and it's cleaner. You don't have to worry about the coals or anything hot or anything at all. I'm not going to take a hard stance. I'll just give you my opinion on this one. That's just what I've been doing all my life. We never dreamed of trying to go cook on the beach. I don't even understand why we're talking about it, because it just creates, just like anything else that you don't allow, it creates issues. That's why we're talking about it, because it has created issues. And I think Chief Talbert said earlier, it's a privilege to be able to have this beach here, and for locals to be able to growing up, I accessed it once a year if we had enough money to take the vacation. For us to have access to it anytime we want to walk down there, most of us can cook something and get to the beach and eat it before it gets cold. A lot of us can. So I've never, even today, even this weekend, I just took food that didn't need to be cooked, that was already prepared. That's just what but I'm not going to I'll go with the committee's will on this one. I like rules and regulations that they're not going to work 100% of the time, but that tend to deter problems as it relates to safety, wildlife, hygiene, cleanliness, aesthetic, enhancement, whatever. So I can't even, I'm too far the other way, I think, to even weigh in on this one.
Mr. Chairman, I think at this point you ought to probably, undergo Robert's Rules of Orders, maybe call for questions. And
Does anybody want to make a motion on the subject of grills? Seeing none. Moving forward. Does anybody else have a section of the code that they want to address? Ms. Mary Lou.
Can we,
sorry.
Can we, because we're supposed to start with the South Walton Turtle Watch presentation. Can we go, do you mind if we go back to that? That was kind of one of the first things, because they've been sitting there waiting.
is pertinent to this, I'm
It
guessing.
It is,
is,
uh-huh,
absolutely.
it absolutely is.
Well, that's actually the point that I think I was gonna raise.
Oh, okay.
I just have two things real quick. But
Is that okay if we continue with Mary Lou?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay.
first thing is equipment that is not stored in a storage box must be neatly stacked at the toe of the dune. This is not working, this needs to change. Where are you at, Reverend? I am on page 25.
22,
What's-
section 60.
Number 6. It starts with temporary beach storage boxes allowed on the beach by specific place permitted vendor.
But that's related to the sea turtles too.
Yeah,
That's related to
related
the
to a
sea
lot of
turtles, so
that's
why
kind of,
can't,
that's what they're doing their presentation.
if they do theirs, then we'll incorporate these other things into
Right,
that,
but we're
correct?
still talking about chapter 20.
And-
I have one other thing.
Yeah,
No.
We need to be proactive about the reefs. I'm a huge supporter of the reefs, but I see commercial activity in the future happening there.
It's already
I
happening.
see slides, I see trampolines, I see people being shuttled. I have videos of people being shuttled, jumping in 20 feet of water, playing, and then being picked up. It's a huge liability for the county. I don't know what we need to do to
Gotta be
regulate it, but
addressed.
we've got to do something to stop that
It's-
from happening.
But that's state property, it's not county property.
Right, but
It's
The
not the
charter
county.
fishermen are regulated now, why wouldn't, I mean, they're in state
Charter fishermen are not regulated by the county once they get off.
Jumping off the boats, getting back on the boats, being brought in and jump off the boats again. I mean, overcrowded boats, no life jackets. Somebody.
That's an FWC regulation.
Yeah. I think we need to say something in here to be proactive about it.
About accessing the
About
reefs.
commercial vessels shuttling people to the reefs.
from shore is the big deal.
Sorry. I just feel like we need to be proactive in controlling the commercial activities of the reefs. Not this year, not next year, but in 5 years, 10 years, I see it becoming a crab island everywhere.
Oh.
With the slides and the trampolines and the tiki huts and, because I mean, I go out to them all the time, I snorkel them all the time, but I am seeing commercial vessels dropping way too many people off at once and just leaving them out there
Where?
at Grayton Beach.
At Grayton?
hmm
I've heard it's happening
I've had a lot of people tell me that it's happening.
Well,
just
I mean,
think we need to be proactive.
I was there Sunday with my boat and three couples total, and we snorkeled and even scuba dove it. It was super fun. Dive flag and everything. It's state property.
Right.
It's not our jurisdiction to regulate the activities. The beach fishermen are regulated when they're on the sand. But once they're in the water, that's an FWC enforcement issue.
So my question to you is, can somebody get a permit to put a trampoline out there?
I have no idea. I mean,
Yes,
who,
ma'am, they can under the 2260 Water Sports Vending Code. Now, would they be able to do it
Not what?
in a Grayton Beach State Park reef? No.
Topsail, Deer Lake, none of the
If
reefs?
the, if the reef is in, you know, there would be some question about that, but, you know, typically our water sports are items that work off of a Walton County beach.
Okay.
Okay, and it could be a privately held beach or a public beach. Right now, all of the water sports activities are restricted to west of Topsail Hill State Park. Okay, so there's already a current code that prohibits any water sports activities east of there.
Okay.
But in the case of the state parks, we do not regulate activity in the state parks or off their beaches. So I can't comment on that.
Okay.
So if there are boats coming near shore and picking up and dropping off and it's endangering swimmers that are swimming at a county park,
Mhm.
who, I mean, do we just say it's not our jurisdiction in the
No.
water, so we don't?
Well,
care?
no, there is current language in the code about how you operate a vessel within 500 feet of shore.
That's what I think we're
And it's
talking
already
about.
in there. But to prohibit them from doing that is, one, it's not equal.
I don't think,
You know.
were you talking about prohibiting it? I think we're
Okay,
talking
we
about.
already have language in the code of vessel operation within 500 feet of shore.
it's a no-wake zone.
So,
Who
so,
regulates that? Who watches that?
Ultimately, our code enforcement does have some regulation over it. Okay. Now, our opportunities to interact with a 24-foot, vessel offshore is limited because we have one jet ski, and we typically don't deploy it unless there is some emergency situation that needs it, or a other agency assist. Okay. other words, we don't commonly get on our jet ski and go ride around looking for violations in the waters.
Well, that's something that I was going to bring up as well, because during the summer and during the reef deployments, there was at one point, and your guys were awesome at Ed Walton that day. We had a reporter that wanted to come out and get some footage. So unbeknownst to me, I approached the beach to acquire the reporter and was promptly told by the lifeguard that I couldn't be within 750 feet with the vessel at all. But then the guy was super nice and got the fire department's jet ski, put the young lady on it, and brought her out, and she did her reporting thing from y'all's jet ski, which was super cool. I don't think there's understanding amongst the agencies about what is legal and not. From my perspective, or from what I was under the impression, you could launch a boat from Grayton and Inlet Beach. You could pull a boat up to the beach anywhere as long as you were proceeding at an idle speed to pick somebody and retrieve somebody from the beach. To address Mary Lou's concern about trampolines and slides and things like that on top of one of the artificial reefs, I think that would be an absolute insane idea, because they're rock and concrete, and hitting them, diving onto them would be probably quite painful. They are 6 feet underwater or greater, but I mean, I don't think we have jurisdiction, especially on this committee, to regulate what happens in state waters.
Got it. Somebody sent me a video showing a whole huge fishing boat overcrowded with people, and they jumped off in 20 feet of water, and the boat came in and got more people. They were shuttling people, but they left them out there. I mean, I wouldn't want to be left out there. I mean, I like to have my board and my kayak.
I don't blame you.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
just want us to be proactive to stop anything from happening like that, if we could.
And I don't want
I
to
think
be.
we're going to have a hard time doing it. Like, once again, the waters of the state of Florida are regulated by state agencies, okay? We do have some jurisdiction over operations off the beach, but when it comes to operating in the waters, and then particularly on reefs that are adjacent to a state park, it's going to be very hard for the county code to supersede those state regulations.
Right.
So if they're operating in an unsafe manner, they're subject to FWC and Coast Guard regulations. So.
Well, I think, but I don't want it to get lost in the mix here. I think there are two issues. One, whether we can control them or not. One is commercial operations out at the reefs, slides, whatever.
Right.
If you want to see a nightmare, go to Crab Island during season. So if we start getting that off of our beaches, wow.
Okay, you're aware of the struggle that the city of Destin.
Yeah,
has
they're
had.
getting somewhere because they got involved, even though it's not their jurisdiction. They're pushing to get it resolved,
Right.
and it's going, I believe, to get resolved, or at least there's progress toward it.
Right.
But so that's my point. Just because it might not be the county's jurisdiction, it impacts the county. So the county can get involved and at least make other agencies aware, work together to figure out what to do about it. But that's one issue that's totally separate from the near shore embarking and disembarking and all of that.
Right.
And I think there are some things in the code that pertain to that, but this is a whole new scenario that we're dealing with. We've never had these artificial reefs out there before, and so I think Mary Lou's point is a very good one. Whether it's new code that's needed or existing code that just needs to be rethought and looked at and refamiliarized so that we don't end up with people getting killed out there and for absolutely no reason, needlessly, or hurt, I think it's a really good point. I mean, when you have boats coming in and there are swimmers in the water and they've always been able to safely swim because there are regulations that keep boats from entering into where they're swimming, this is just another example of it. Not saying shut down getting people in and out of there, you need to, but it needs to be thought through and looked at and taken very seriously. It can be a matter of life and death.
Anything you do is a matter of life and death. Hiking in the woods is probably equally as risky as swimming in the Gulf. So I'm not for regulating people's activities. I'm not for regulating people's enjoyment, and I'm certainly not for regulating people's economic enterprise. the intent of the reefs is for obviously enjoyment, both recreationally and commercially. So it's my hope that there are commercial enterprises utilizing the artificial reefs. It's my hope that there's scuba diving, ventures that want to take, maybe we expand the permitting process for commercial captains off the beach to give them 15 permits for dive charter operations.
That'd be great.
But I don't want to.
No,
I'm
no
not.
problem.
I don't.
But we've got to make sure it's being done safely. That's what
Yes.
regulations are for, period. So if there are codes already in existence or ones that can be put in place that are just ensuring that the getting in and out is done safely, that's what we're talking about here, not prohibiting them from doing
Right.
it. Clearly, you have to get out there to the reef. But if you just don't even pay attention and say, well, willy-nilly, they can do it however, whatever, we don't care, then you're putting those people in danger. But more pertinently, I think, they're choosing to do it. But there are people in the water that are not. They don't have, and so they shouldn't be endangered when they have nothing to do with it. That's, I think, the most important
are there
point.
regulations about how you kayak in the Choctawhatchee River? I mean, do they teach you not to go near an alligator nest? I mean, is that not inherently
This is
dangerous?
different. That's an alligator that's in its habitat. This is a boat that is like if there were some huge thing that came barreling through the forest, that is different from saying I can get bitten by a snake when I'm walking down a trail.
But there's
I mean,
there's
it's just
already
different.
regulation for fishing.
I think the easiest thing to do would be to add it to 2256 and add the word vessels to the title.
What page is 2256?
2256 is a code on personal watercraft. It has all the items you're asking for. It just simply needs to have the word vessel added to it.
I mean, simple safety stuff.
In excess of idle speed, closer than 500 feet. Water's actually.
It addresses personal watercraft because there was a push previously to control personal watercraft because boats weren't a problem. Ms. Moore has a valid point. We could foresee having more boat activity between beach and water-based amenity. And so I think the easiest way to do this would just be to add the word vessels to personal watercraft. And or just change that to vessels, because under the definition
all vessels.
of vessels, it's
Right.
listed as personal watercraft.
Yeah.
What does that change? We're saying right now you can't operate within greater than idle speed.
Well, I think what Ms. Moore is asking for is a county effort versus a FWC effort. FWC already has all these rules and regulations in it. And I think what she's asking for is have the county the ability to offer some sort of code that can then regulate behavior. So while we all as voters understand what is responsible, there are some people that don't understand that and will take off, from the beach, in a unsafe manner and all that. So even though it's a problem that doesn't exist right now, it's a problem that may exist in the future. And I understand. And since we have it for personal watercraft, why not have it for vessels? I mean, it should just be vessels.
I have no problem with that, nor do I have a problem, with any type of county enforcement and with a penalty, with a fine or adding language to that. I just don't want to add any restrictive language to rules that are already in existence that are working.
I just want the people to be safe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Well,
Safe.
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
The people that are shuttling them are not doing it in a safe manner.
Yeah.
That's the
Well,
problem.
then give the code enforcement the authority to ticket them.
Well, and they may already have the authority, it's just awareness. I think we're saying this is a whole new world that nobody's really been paying attention to because it hasn't existed. Really, from a very minimal, there's been a very minimal need for that. Now, all of a sudden, we have many reefs out there and there's more need. So it's just something to be aware of, I think.
10-4.
So does somebody want to make a motion regarding Mr. Kellenberger's suggestion about adding vessel to 2256?
56.
So moved.
Have
Second,
a motion and a second. Does anybody want to have any more discussion on that? Any from the audience? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, motion's approved. Okay, now, committee, do y'all want to bounce back to the agenda and come back to some other code items?
Or do the turtle.
Everybody cool with that? Okay. South Walton Turtle Watch under new business.
Okay, perfect. So I thought since we were talking about water and beach activities ordinance and possibly making some changes or amendments to those, I thought it would be a good time for South Walton Turtle Watch to do a brief presentation about what's been going on the beaches from our perspective. And so since we're running out of time a little bit, I've got Beverly and Barbara, if you guys want to come up. And they've been kind enough to, on our South Walton Turtle Watch behalf, put a presentation together.
Thank you. I'm Beverly Ottson. That's O-T-T-Z-E-N. And my colleague here from South Walton Turtle Watch is Barbara Van Stavern. We appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this subject that is very dear to us. 2017 was a big year for sea turtles in South Walton. We have 126 nests, which is a record. This is way more than we've ever had before, and it means that more turtles are coming here. So for whatever reason, they're coming. So it increases our responsibility to make sure that we're helping rather than hindering with the nesting process in order to save this valuable species. As we walk the 26 miles of beach every morning at dawn, we've noticed a lot of things that could be improved, and we'd just like to share those with you today. We hope by the end of our presentation you'll agree with us that some changes need to be made in order to make the beaches more hospitable for turtles, but also more inviting, convenient, and attractive for our visitors and residents. Sea turtles are among the oldest creatures on Earth. They survived the extinction of the dinosaurs, and they're still here in pretty much the same form they have been for a very long time. But now all species of sea turtles are in danger of extinction, and one of the prime reasons for that is nesting, habitat destruction, and encroachment. And unfortunately, we're guilty of that encroachment right here in Walton County. All the pictures you're going to see now were taken by South Walton Turtle Watch volunteers. When Barbara put out the word, everybody send me your pictures, so many pictures came in that her computer crashed. So our biggest job was to narrow down the number of pictures from the hundreds and hundreds down to a few, and also to focus on just the one issue of nesting encroachment. There are other issues to do with sea turtles that we're not even going to try to cover today, but we're just going to talk about the encroachment. Their ideal nesting habitat is up at the toe of the dune and in the edge of the grasses. Unfortunately, they only come on land to nest. So it's not like they're here all the time and they just choose to nest in the summertime. They're not even here except when they come up to nest. And that's their ideal nesting place. But this is what it looks like. Unfortunately, the nesting area has become a repository for everything that people bring to the beach. So it's not only the vendors' equipment, but also everything else that beachgoers take to the beach that they don't happen to take back to their houses or wherever they're staying. Then you get discarded items and trash left out there too, and it just makes it difficult for the turtles. So we're going to just keep on running through some pictures here of what the turtles deal with when they come up to nest.
Safe to assume if there's any obstruction, they turn around and go back and come back the next day?
Not
They
always.
often do. Sometimes they'll go all the way around the obstruction, and sometimes we'll keep going here. We found this in places you wouldn't think a turtle could even get, but since they can't get to where they want to be, look at this. So a lot of times they do exactly what you said. And we call this a false crawl when a turtle comes up on the beach and for whatever reason they don't make their nest. Those are false crawls. Obviously, let's keep going with false crawls. There are a lot of them that this year we keep track of a lot of data, and more than 50%. The false crawls were more than 50% of the total nests. So this is happening a lot, and a lot of it would be preventable. You can see the wood left out there, probably a piece of wood from a bonfire or something, and turtle actually dug the egg chamber, but then didn't lay the eggs, got freaked out for whatever reason. They are obstructed by anything. Turtles don't have a reverse gear. So when they hit something, they can't go anywhere else. So
these vendor chairs are not put in the boxes at night?
Oh, no,
Well,
We're allowed to store the equipment to the dune, provided it's going to be used the next day.
Okay.
Oh, no.
this is that the one with the ashes? Yeah, you can see what y'all were talking about a while ago. Turtle laid a nest right next to the ashes. Sometimes they get on the ashes. They can't deal with that. So more obstructed nesting attempts. It's hard to see on your screen the tracks. Are y'all able to see the actual turtle tracks?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Sometimes they will nest next to the pile of chairs. More often they don't. When the turtle comes up to nest and they can't nest and they go back to the water, they usually dump their eggs in the water, and that's
The end.
That's the end of it. You know, that's a nest that could have happened that didn't. So these are probably, I won't venture to say if that's legal or not, but it was an obstacle.
That's cool.
That's crazy.
The practice of leaving the stuff piled at the toe of the dunes is also damaging the dunes themselves, obviously. And they serve as habitat for many other creatures besides the turtles, the birds, and a lot of other things. And they're also valuable protection from storms. Okay, we're not through. let's go a little faster. So, as Walton County evolves as a tourist destination, the rules of the beach also need to be changed to accommodate all these creatures that depend on the beach environment for their survival. Leave No Trace was a step in the right direction, but as you can see from these photos, we're leaving much more than a trace. So we do need to modify, clarify, and strictly enforce the ordinance. And we're really happy to see that y'all are talking about that today. We have a few suggestions. I didn't get real specific about the section of the ordinance because in talking to Kate, she thought that'd be more appropriate to come from the committee. But we would like to see that nothing be left on the beach or the dunes overnight, including that area at the toe of the dunes where it's gotten out of hand. If putting the vendor boxes out there has led the general public to think it's okay for them to put their stuff there too, and then one thing leads to another and we get the mess. It's not reasonable to expect code enforcement to go out there every morning and discern what's permitted and what's not. It's too much to ask of code enforcement to do that on the spot every day. Now, we don't want to interfere with anybody's livelihood. We understand that this vendor business is a business, but we don't see why the county should be providing a warehouse for the vendors on the beach. They can store their equipment elsewhere. They can put it at the houses and the condos who are subscribing to their services. They can use public storage. if they need to hire more people to do this, they need to modify their business model. They can charge more for it, for their services, but if all of them do it together, the market will no doubt support it. They shouldn't be allowed to set up ghost chairs on the beach in the morning. When they do that, the way it is now, people that don't subscribe to a chair vendor either have to get out there really early in the morning or leave their stuff out there all night. This picture was taken by a Turtle Watch volunteer. You can see the people that set up already. This is not vendors' equipment. This is individuals that just wanted to have a place on the beach, so they were out there at 5 in the morning. Neither of these solutions is acceptable for the turtles, obviously. We can't have this kind of stuff left out there all night, but these people left it so they could have a spot the next morning. The companies that rent the paddleboards and the kayaks and all those things need to be responsible for getting those off the beach at night. They need to have an agreement. Whoever puts it on the beach has to take it off, put it somewhere else. So if there were no vendors' equipment stored on the beach, it would be easier to educate the general public that nothing is to be left on the beach. And we're really gratified that y'all are here talking about changing these beach ordinances. We appreciate your interest in maintaining a viable sea turtle nesting habitat in Walton County. These are little hatchlings. The whole world is trying to save sea turtles through various organizations. If you just Google sea turtles, you'll see all kinds of international organizations trying to save this species. We have an opportunity here in Walton County because this is really a very, very major nesting area for sea turtles. That makes us very special. Our tourists are really interested in it. You wouldn't believe the number of questions we all get when we walk out there in our shirts and our hats. Every single time I walk the beach, somebody who's out there enjoying dawn on the beach asks me questions about the turtles. It's part of our tourism. So we would really like to see Walton County earn the distinction of being truly turtle friendly. We thank you for your consideration, and please remember, as we all strongly believe that, and it's a fact, extinction is forever, and they are in danger. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Yeah, and just to kind of top that off, I mean, we've been given such a great opportunity here in Walton County to be good stewards of this endangered species. And it's not, you know, I know people sometimes are sick about hearing, oh, the turtle people. But people do come here, and Valerie was just saying the other day, the number of phone calls that we get, how many nests do we have? When is that nest going to hatch? People are interested in it, and it is a draw. It's part of the natural beauty that we have here in Walton County, and we just need to be really good stewards of it. And my main point is to make a change to 2260 as far as the vendors being able to store their items at the toe of the dunes. It is just exploded. You saw the pictures. There's so much stuff down there. And it's become that competition. We talked about this last year. You know, people start seeing the vendors. Well, the vendors wait for turtle people to stop. They get the okay that stretch of beach is cleared. They can set up their chairs. Well, people are watching that from their condo on the beach. And they're like, I'm going to get there before the vendor does. And just like that one picture, I see the dance almost every morning. You know, Dad running up and down the beach walkover with his tent and, you know, just laden down with stuff. It's not only unsightly, but it's unfair that the county can issue a permit to a vendor to store their stuff there. Nobody else is supposed to store their stuff there. If I leave a kayak there, there's a good chance it's going to be taken away. It just doesn't make any sense, and it needs to change. That's my opinion.
Are there public storage boxes at the regional public accesses?
There is not.
So the vendors' boxes that are permitted are on private property?
Correct.
Well, but beyond the vendors' boxes, I mean, all those chairs that you saw piled up at the toe of the dunes, that wasn't private property. That's where vendors are permitted to set up on public beach.
Yeah, I'll chime in. This committee has made this recommendation for a few years now, but we'll do it again if everybody still agrees. But I personally, I think it's a travesty that it's being allowed at all. I agree. I think I think the Turtle Watch folks said every single thing ought to be off that beach overnight. And I've listened to vendors talk about it. I've listened to people who support the vendors talk about it or related to the vendors talk about it, about how difficult it is to haul those chairs out every morning, haul them back off at night, and it's hot, and there are young kids out there, and they're going to overheat. Look, my brother owns a timber management company. He has one employee, it's him. He goes out in the woods in South Georgia to deal with his business of timber management. There are snakes, deadly snakes, mosquitoes, gnats, if you've been to South Georgia, yellow flies, they get them just like we do, and they bite just like they bite here. Sometimes he's told me he has to pull up to a site and sit in his truck for 5 or 10 minutes because there are so many yellow flies he can't get out of his truck. And it's hard too. It's hot. Everything he does is on foot. It's physical. But that is his choice of business, so he figures it out. And this is public property. I have strained to think of any other situation where publicly owned property is provided to businesses to store their equipment.
It's not.
It is.
Where?
What? It is.
All those
It's-
chairs at the toe of the
What are you
dunes,
talking
those
about?
are
The
public
vendors.
beach
That's
accesses.
private property.
No.
It's not private property.
It's by the beach walkway.
Did you not see the
Clarification.
post behind it that
The
said they
vendors,
own it?
under the vending code, it's under one paragraph that deals with delivery vendors. It says they're allowed to store their equipment at the toe of the dune, provided it is to be rented the next day. And that has no distinction between public or private property. And so the practice is the chairs are rented the next day, they're allowed to store them there
On public property.
on public property.
But there's not a white box.
There's no white box.
All the white boxes are on private property.
And the white
Yeah.
boxes are obstructions.
Yes, they are.
I mean, they're obstructions. If a
Right.
turtle hits that box, it's going to turn around and unload its eggs in the water.
But those stacks of chairs that are left there are not just an obstruction themselves, but then people, not usually the people that are paying to rent those chairs, but people go down to the beach at night,
Yes.
they see them there, they drag them back out. Oh, look, we got some chairs, we're gonna sit and watch the sunset, and then we're gonna have some beers and some more beers and some more beers, and, you know, they're left overnight on the beach. I mean, they're just,
Well, and it encourages the
it's an
behavior.
opportunity, right? And
As
then
you said, private folks think that they should be able to
people
store
say,
their
hey,
stuff
there's
too.
a pile of stuff, I'm gonna leave my pile of stuff down there too. I mean, you can see it in the pictures, those.
I feel like the language, Brian, can you repeat that again, where it's stored at the toe of the dune? I think the language in that opens that up for interpretation and actually gives them the okay that they can do that, because it's so open to interpretation.
Well, I think they are allowed to do it. I don't think it's interpretation. They are allowed to do it today, and that decision has been made year after year recently to continue to allow it. And what I'm saying is I think it ought to not be allowed. They should have to get their equipment off the beach in the evening, just like everybody else does.
With 62 years
Just
old,
like you were
with 2 knee
saying.
replacements, and I have to carry every bit of my equipment up the stairs every day.
Correct.
Right, but
And
it's
we-
your choice not to
Right.
pay
And
for
we have to
vendor
think,
chairs.
in my opinion, we have to think about these things on a totally different scale now. Our visitor numbers, in addition to our permanent population, are exploding and have been for the last several years. I mean, 3.5 million people visiting this little area a year, just like the bonfires. And when he said, what was it, 1,300 a year? That is 1,300 bonfires, and that's just a tiny part of what's happening on the beach in scope. Yeah. And so when you start thinking about, if it's that many bonfires, how many beach chairs? How many umbrellas? You know,
How
we
many
talk
beach
about-
chair vendor permits this summer season did we give out?
62 permitted vendors. Some of those vendors have more than one permit. So all in all, there was, I want to say, right around 100 actual permits issued.
Okay.
I don't know the amount of product on the beach.
Right,
but,
yeah.
I mean, I get it. I want these people to have successful businesses, but I want all people to have successful
Right.
businesses, and for a whole industry to have an advantage over another of free storage of your equipment on public property. I'm dumbfounded why we're still doing this, but we are. I just don't, I can't support it.
I can't support leaving, I'm not in supportive of leaving commercial equipment on a publicly owned beach for any reason whatsoever. And in fact, we're going to get a little further into 2260 in just once we cross this one, of something I want to bring up, but the private property rights of the beachfront owners, if they want to build a white box,
I'm not
on-
talking about
Yeah, we're not
private
talking,
property.
yeah.
This
I'm
is
talking
just
about
on public beaches.
Just public,
property,
yeah.
public property.
it would be
I wish
that-
they would
yeah.
do the right thing, but that's
Right.
their private property.
We
can't
can encourage
control
them
that.
to do the right thing, but
Okay,
let's.
so now we're
but
on the
I'm
same
talking-
page
But
there.
if we set that
Public
example
property.
on the public property, then we can go back and perhaps encourage people to,
Well, it'll help,
not
I
meet their
bet.
stuff.
Many sections of the code address the two different property relationships differently.
Well,
We don't have control over private property in this way, so.
Well, from what I gather, we're in just doing some cursory research around the community. Walton is one of the few communities, or few counties, I should say, coastal counties, that doesn't utilize the beaches as a revenue source to the fullest extent of its ability. In all fairness, I am pro-business. I do not believe in limiting entrepreneurials and capitalism. But on our public beaches, I just don't see why we wouldn't put an RFP out for each of the major accesses that has parking where the major vending activities occur. Whoever bids it, let it go to the highest bidder. In my estimate, I think Ed Walton alone, my mom lives near there, and I'm watched that beach grow for the last 20 years, and she's had a house down there. And, from the 50% of that, it's estimated that you would probably see in excess of $100,000 potentially a bidder would pay to have the exclusive vending rights there. Times 13 is $1.3 million in revenue to the TDC. That vendor would then be required, in my opinion, to have a person on staff every day from, say, March 1st to November 1st. They're responsible for taking care of everything. It would alleviate, I understand why you've got to put the chairs out. I'm not for speculative, renting on that, but I think that's going to be impossible to enforce because it all is changing a name tag on the back of the chair. I, for one, can't stand having to go down to the beach at 7, 8 o'clock and there's no real estate left because, vendors have set it up. But you put the burden of responsibility at that public access on a single individual who has the privilege of vending there for a fee or an expense or a right or whatever that bid is. If it storms, he still pays the county whatever that pro rata daily rate is. But if there's an issue with the materials, how he keeps them there, any of that, he simply loses or they simply lose their right to vend on that thing and the contract goes to the next one down the list. That would be a solution to a lot of problems. The blowback's going to occur because you've got 62 vendors, 32 of them make their living, or 60% of them make their living by vending on the major public beaches. It's still public property. So putting that revenue stream in place, Brian, what is the code enforcement's, salary budget a year?
I don't have it all put together, but personnel, equipment, and all that, it's probably around $750,000.
So if the revenue generated from having an RFP process for vending on public beaches exceeded that number significantly, do you think y'all could find a better place to spend that $750,000? Wouldn't it?
I got a list of things.
I'm sure Lee Moore would like to plant some trees down the median of the highway. I'd like to see some more reefs go in the water. But I just don't understand why we're, minimizing the potential return the community could gain by simply allowing for a single source vendor at these public locations. It cleans up the trash, cleans up the image, makes all the umbrellas homogeneous. Hell, slap Visit South Walton on every umbrella for all I care. Make that part of the process. You know, I think there's just, it's run amok, it's run afoul. I'm all for private enterprise. There's nothing I would recommend restricting any of these activities on private property. Condo wants to contract with a certain vendor, more power to them.
Yep.
But put these public beaches on an RFP program to where there's some organization and there's control and there's repercussions for any, something that's not codified in the permitting process. And I don't know how we get there, Brian, but that to me is the brass ring of how to solve this problem.
Right. But you still have the neighborhood, your public neighborhood accesses that don't have parking lots and stuff. And a lot of these pictures, I mean, that's kind of when I'm right across the street from, and they're pretty junked up with beach vendor stuff. So there's still that problem to solve, and that would be just not to allow.
Use the revenue to more forcefully enforce than the leave no trace.
Right, but right now, we're giving them permission. This says they can leave the stuff at the toe of the dune. So my issue is removing that language so that they cannot leave it at the toe of the dunes.
Can anybody use the neighborhood accesses? They're for the public, right?
Yeah, they're public.
They're not private.
No.
Neighborhood beach accesses are public beach accesses.
Okay.
They don't always empty out onto public beach property.
Yeah.
Okay?
Right.
And so the relationships we have neighborhood beach accesses on property we own that does go down to beach, this public beach. It varies in width. We have neighborhood beach accesses that are on easements that go down in, onto property that is privately held. We own the easement down or we enjoy the easement down to the main high water line. Okay? And so those will be considered public beach accesses to get people down to the main high water line to traverse east and west, as well as to enjoy the right of customary use.
Right.
And then we have some of those neighborhood beach accesses that actually stop at the toe of the dune. And so they would be also considered for that same use. Get to the main high water line or to enjoy customary use. But so the private property owner still retains their rights, as a private property owner. And then they have, some restrictive use based on customary use.
Okay.
Another question, on private property, the beach in front of private property, regardless of who owns it, other than vendor equipment, what does the leave no trace ordinance say for that part of the beach?
One of the main definitions of leave no trace is it says on the beach. Okay, and so then the beach is defined as the sandy portion of the system between the toe of the dune or line of permanent vegetation and the water's edge. All right, so as you know, sand fencing is a means of increasing your dunes. And so our general rule of thumb is that if the items have been pulled up north or landward of any sand fencing has been put out, or the southernmost point of any permanent structure, a dune walkover, that is not a leave no trace item. Okay? Keep in mind that a lot of this stuff that we're talking about is on private property, so we have some of those issues to deal with.
So that was what I was getting to. So if a vendor leaves a stack of chairs at the toe of the dune on private property, is that, if it weren't a vendor, would that be a violation of leave no trace?
If it's landward of the southernmost point of a permanent structure on that property, we do not consider that a leave no trace item.
Landward.
The reason is because they've made an effort to get it off the flat sandy portion of the beach. I recognize that the turtles prefer to nest up at the toe of the dune as well.
Correct.
And so, but if it was defined as all portions of the beach coastal system, then we would include those items off there. The leave no trace ordinance or code has followed a roller coaster type life. It was first started in 2009 to address the proliferation of personal equipment that was being left at the public beach accesses. All right? And so that's when we started doing it. And in that, it said that you cannot leave your items at a public beach access in any form. All right? And so then Most recently, it was interpreted as, or 2013, it changed slightly, and then in 2015, interpretation was handed down that items, if they're stored at the toe of the dune, they're not considered leave no trace. And so, should there be some verbiage about general public use of storage there? I think it'd be a good idea. The vendor's equipment, there's all kind of arguments for and against. And I understand both sides of it. So there needs to be a fair and equitable agreement. We're researching some what I call collective storage devices that would limit the chairs, being stored out there by themselves, and put them in more of a monolithic container, like a box, or some kind of container that's held up off of the beach that is attached to the existing boardwalk.
Yes.
Now, there's some pros and cons for that. Is how do you who gets to use it? How do they get to use it? What form is it in? Who maintains it? Who's got liability for it? Is it good for the boardwalk construction in the event of a storm event? In other words, does it make like a net that causes more destruction? We've offered up to the vendors, industry association members of, would y'all consider a collective co-op type situation on the beach? In other words, if there's going to be, because they kind of figure out during the year where they're going to vend, on public beaches. And so if there's 5 of you there, how about you figure out if you can, all collectively provide an attendant for the day to help solve the empty chair problem? Because, they're no longer ghost sets because they're rented, so they meet the definition of being rented the next day or rented that day. It's just the operational methods of putting them out and taking them up. So there's a lot of problems with that. If it's my attendant for the day, obviously my chairs are going to get better, care, as in placement and all that. But there's a lot of things to work through. What you're talking about, vendor managed, a managed vendor program, has been floated before, and there's been some discussion about pilot programs, more discussion about what does it look like. We've developed what's really considered a concession agreement, and so that's a base fee and a sharing of either revenue or profit. Okay, and then with that goes rules and regulations of how you operate on that beach.
And how would we go about getting that drafted up and recommended if the...
We already have a draft copy of it. And so I was asked last year to develop this, and so I looked at my neighbors that had concession agreements on their public property, and I took that in and kind of massaged it to make it fit our particular concession, which is beach equipment. I don't think we're ready to vend T-shirts and suntan lotion and all that. But certainly there's a need for beach equipment by the user, and there's a need for beach equipment sales by the industry that makes money to feed their families. So,
do you have any projections of the revenue generated on public beaches by beach chair vending?
I do. I have it by daily occupancy rate and by price point.
Can you email
have
that?
A matrix?
Do you know it off the top of your head?
They generate a lot of money. They do. I mean, if you set them out, what I did is I gridded out the public beach accesses, and then I made a matrix based on occupancy rate going from 100% down to 10% based on 10% increments, and then I did the other axis on price point. And so you have a matrix that tells you, at any given occupancy rate and any given daily unit price, what that would generate. Then I have it extrapolated out, per week, per month, per season.
Can you share that
Yeah,
with me?
I'll be glad to send it all to the committee. Now, once again, this is a matrix that I developed, and it's based on a certain setup standard, and then the actual revenue generation amounts, they have many factors that affect them.
So this is revenue generated on a publicly subsidized marketplace.
This will be revenue generated by the rental of chairs and umbrellas
on public property.
On public property.
Yes.
So, of that significant revenue, was there an estimate of what based upon what other counties' percentages are of those revenues. I'm not concerned about profits. What other counties' percentages, or do
No,
they have a set fee?
Yeah, no, when I inquired with other counties, because they have different situations, in other words, different type beach environments, different clientele and all that, I didn't try to compare, what they do. But their general concession agreement is a base fee. So the person that wants to use the property or conduct the concession pays a base fee, and then they pay either a percentage of profit or a percentage of revenue.
Okay. So through that matrix and then your conversations with the neighboring counties, were you potentially able to extrapolate a dollar figure that Walton County would, or the TDC for that matter, would generate from this proposal?
My revenue generation models are purely on a rental situation. It's not on a concession agreement or anything. So if one person had that beach and they were able to set their chairs up in this configuration, and then whatever occupancy rate they had for that day, that's what they would generate. So it doesn't consider what a base fee is or what percentage of profit or revenue is being shared. It's strictly a revenue generation model of what that beach could generate as a venue for beach equipment rentals.
But could you apply a sample?
Oh, yeah, most certainly you could.
Made up fee and see how much revenue it would generate for the county?
Are we talking 10 million, talking 20 million, talking 100 million?
In revenue for the
lot of
county?
money.
Or
No, in
total revenue?
no, total revenue.
Well, once again,
is a lot.
you got to. It's all market driven, okay? And then so our market is very unique, all right. And what I'm getting at is people will pay large amounts of money for items that that normally would not generate that type of revenue, all right. So it's not purely on what is my ability to make money on this, okay.
My meaning a
In
private
other
vendor
words,
or
the other
county?
words, the cost that somebody would pay for that beach may not be based solely on the ability of that particular venue to generate X amount of money. There's other motivations that would cause the price to go up.
How is that a bad thing?
It's not a bad thing for the county, but the county is not an entity that is in business to generate revenue. We're a business to generate revenue to cover the costs of running the county. We're not a profit-making organization. So it's not bad for us. I'm not saying, but we're not in that business to be a profit center.
But we're not talking about making it a profit center.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not only would, look, this is just normal. We're not talking about going out, charging vendors to vend on public property, and then that benefit comes back to the public that owns the property is absolutely normal.
I agree.
So, I mean, I think what Andy's trying to get at is if you took a conservative, like, here's an average of what our neighbors charge people to vend on their beaches, and applied it, how much money are we talking about? Is it $200,000 a year? Is it $5 million a year? I mean, if it's a whole bunch, then maybe you charge a more conservative fee. It's not the making of the money that's the driver. It's the doing what's right and fair to the citizens that own the property. So that's what we all forget. Walton County does not own the property, this entity called Walton County. It's the people who pay taxes and live here that own the property.
What I'm saying is we wouldn't put a dollar amount on it. We would put out a RFP, request for proposal.
Yes.
And then what I was getting at is I got no idea what somebody's willing to pay for Ed Walleen Beach. And what the point I was trying to make is that it might not just be motivated by its ability to generate money. In other words, I'm going to say I'm going to generate $2 million on that beach for that yearly annual lease. All right, so I'm going to pay after I figure, because most people figure up operating expenses, reasonable amount of profit, and then, they come up with those. But there may be some motivation that I'm going to pay more than it's worth and that I'm going to generate from it because I'm going to put 50 other people out of business. And then I'm going to slowly grab the whole market. and then I'm going to make some changes.
But you're talking about
So-
public beaches. You're
I
not
know.
talking about the marketplace. There's,
Yeah.
what percentage of Walton County's 26 miles is publicly owned?
I don't know that exactly. There's 18 miles of beach when you take out the state parks. And of that, I would say that we probably own 35% of that beach frontage.
So there's still 12 miles for every vendor to operate on. Because, I mean,
Private.
private beach.
Right. We're trying to get into the mechanics of setting a price on a piece of property. That's not the way it'd be done. It would be, first of all, it has to be decided if it's a public benefit that is good for all concerned. I get your point. And so people that live in the county that make money off the industry are also county constituents, right?
Some
I-
of them.
Right.
Some of them.
Okay.
Yeah,
They don't
So,
necessarily have to live here to
but the
vend here.
majority are the people that go and visit the beach
it's-
and live here and like to enjoy the beach the way it
But
is.
still, there are people that got to be considered, so.
But what we're not talking about gouging vendors so that the county realizes more revenue.
I'm not talking about that either.
He's talking about using, someone would overbid it to exclude the use by other people, so.
The reason it hasn't been considered in the past is because it will take out a certain number of vendors' ability to do business.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, and so that's the reason
It'll
why.
go to the highest
Because I
bidder.
think there is a general understanding that it could resolve some of the issues we have on public beaches. The con of it is that it takes away the ability of some of that industry to be able to generate money for their families. That's why I believe it's not being considered. Those are usually the answers or the questions that come up, or the reasons that come up, is that it has ability to create a monopoly, and therefore not fair to all businesses concerned. So maybe it's a situation where you have multiple vendors on one beach, and they bid for that right to do that. But once again, it wouldn't be a price point that we set. It would be a request for proposal, and then there would be an evaluation of those proposals. One of them is the amount of money, and so now we're talking about a pay-to-play type evaluation, not a pay-for-a-service type evaluation. Most RFPs we get, we put out are for a service that we will get a benefit from. See what I'm saying? Whereas this one is really a right to use a piece of property exclusively. It's a rental instead of a service providing thing. They are providing a service, but it's not to us. It's people that come to the beach.
Pay for it.
Correct.
Oh, what?
And they pay for it.
Right. So in other words, there'd be evaluation criteria would be set up, and that's how it would be selected. And I'm sure some of that would be that you can limit the ability of one beach per vendor, stuff like
Yeah,
that.
you can spread out the pie and make
Yeah.
it more fair.
Yeah.
But you're going to have some elimination of competition no matter what.
I
And
agree.
that's the
But
case
thinking
in
it'll also
every single industry,
I
just
agree.
about. I
It'll
mean,
create more competition as time goes by because of nobody's going to operate a business in the red. That's smart.
Right.
not for
So-
long.
Right. I mean, I think what you would see is raising the bar of all vendors to make a better competition for the privilege of the revenue stream potential from that specific location. Then you've got the authority or the ability to make sure they're insured, to make sure there's no stuff left on the toe of the dune. You can, all of these other problems are solved.
They don't move
I do not
posters around
want,
and
and
lifeguards
once
in.
again, just to be consistent and have stated, I don't want to regulate people's business and people's free enterprise. I just don't believe in free enterprise that's subsidized by public property.
Correct.
I mean,
That's
if you want to
exactly
graze
the
cattle out west on the state parks, you buy a permit. You pay for the right. So I don't see, and I understand the vendors pay a certain right now, and I understand that there's a lot of revenue generated that supports a lot of families. I don't want to get involved in that. I just don't, I mean, it's gone so far to one direction, the pendulum's got to come back. And how do we, it's gonna be painful to somebody.
But that's a complex issue.
Right.
We moved from the chairs on the beach to
Right.
redoing
Because
the
this is
entire
something we
vendor-
can do something
we
about
can-
now.
We can do something
So-
about the chairs and the umbrella.
Can I make a motion?
Maybe we
Please.
should take a 5-minute break
Yeah.
and then get back into the business because we're 2 hours and 15
Yeah.
minutes into this meeting.
Okay.
Can I make a motion first,
And we
though?
have other
Because I
things
do
to
have
do.
to go.
Okay, just 1 second.
Okay.
Bob?
Can I?
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay, so addressing section 2260, number 1, the vendor permit, the very last sentence, my motion is to remove that second half. So delivery vendors must either remove their goods from the beach.
That's it.
Must
They
remove their
must remove.
goods from the beach each day, period. The second half of that goes away. There's no storing at the toe of the dunes.
Second.
Where was this again?
It's page 24, it's the top, it's that first paragraph.
The
It's that last part about
It
storing.
takes away the option of leaving them on the beach
Right.
at night.
They just need to take it.
We're
remove
talking
their
about
goods.
2260B1.
Yes, that's it, sorry.
I have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion?
Yes.
That's what the ordinance is for, correct? Public beach?
Delivery, it says delivery vendors, so it doesn't
Oh.
distinguish between, but I would recommend adding to public beach.
Okay.
Do you want to amend your motion?
Yes, I amend it to include adding public beach.
At public beaches.
I'll still second.
Did we lose Bob? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
I'm Georgine Newell, that's Newell. And I think you finally got to the point that I wanted to bring up. I think the greatest thing that we could do as far as making changes to this ordinance this year is to have all the rules for vendors be both on public and private property. Simple as that. Because right now we have two
I don't
sets of
think
rules.
we have the authority.
Yeah, we don't have the authority.
Wait a minute.
Well, we regulate private property in
Many ways. Customary use.
Now, whether it will get passed is a whole other.
Well, but the thing is,
It's not the law of the land.
it's not the law of the land, but I think we need to move in that direction.
I disagree. I mean,
You're not saying what the private owner can do. You're only saying what the vendor can do. Anyway.
True, the private owner still gets the same exact service.
Yep.
Exactly.
I agree.
They get chairs
it's
when they
their
want.
property. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to delete the second half of that sentence on public beaches. Bob, sorry about that. She made a motion to delete the last half of a sentence in that paragraph 1 that we were talking about deleting or store them at the toe of the dune if customer is using the item again the following day. She wants to have that removed.
And on public
at public
beaches.
beaches. So, motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Just to be clear, so now at public accesses, the vendors can't leave it, but they can leave their stuff in front of all the condominiums, in front of all the places like Watersound that owns a big stretch of beach. Everywhere else that's not one of these public accesses, they can still pile their stuff up there. Is that what y'all are saying?
Well,
Well,
let me step back.
That's not gonna solve the problem.
Let me step back one thing.
Right.
The
We make a
Destination
recommendation.
Improvement Committee is an advisory board to the TDC. So the motions that are floated and approved today go forward as an advisory recommendation. So it's not the final disposition of that situation. But yes, what they just passed was a recommendation for approval with TDC that on public beaches,
Passed.
items not be allowed to be stored at the toe of the dam.
With me abstaining.
And I just would say for the record, I agree with it applying both public and private, but
Yeah.
this is better than
Right.
Yeah.
what we got to.
Okay. Y'all want to take a quick recess?
Sure.
5
Yep.
minutes.
thought we have to go.
Yeah, we do. We've got to go. So are we gonna, Stacy? Stacy.
Thank you.
Okay, we got to get a couple of things done real quick. Under old business and for sale sign, Lee was going to give an update real quick. Is there anything in that, Lee, that's going to require a motion?
No.
Okay, and then Kellenberger, on your project update, is there anything that you've got that's going to require a motion?
No, it's just my typical thing that we can forego it. I mean, everybody knows where we are, I think.
Okay.
I can give a brief description of it if you'd like, but it's not necessary today.
Okay. So with that, do you want to make a motion to close and reschedule? And then you just do an update after? Update after? How do you, these two have got to leave and we're going to lose our quorum.
Okay.
So
if y'all want to reschedule, I mean, once again, this committee is an advisory committee to TDC. The items that move forward with a board approval carry weight. Okay. I mean,
I think we ought to, if we can get there quickly, we ought to make a motion on the vending. What did you call it? Vendor program or whatever. Or beach management.
The RVP or
the yeah.
If y'all want to reconvene next week, I
process.
got time. We'll reconvene next week. I'm not sure where we can meet, but
Because we got to get it done quickly.
Do you want to make a motion while you've got a quorum?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we recommend that what do you call that?
I call it a managed vendor program.
Managed vendor program be put in place
At the public accesses.
at the public accesses for
Okay.
next year.
And you mean any public access, not just the ones with parking lots?
the ones with parking lots.
Neighborhood
the
ones
regional,
as
yeah.
well.
Regional beach
Regional
accesses.
ones.
All of them?
The 8 or 9
No.
regional.
No,
Those are the
regional.
ones that
The
you
ones
can
with parking.
drive.
Seven.
Yeah, drive to.
7.
Okay.
But we're about to add a couple more.
Got a couple more.
Because there are vendors at the neighborhood accesses too.
There are.
Okay.
But Brian, you said that you had something already put together.
Yeah.
Is that something that we should look at and review before we
Well,
and
I think
reconvene, or
what y'all probably need to recommend is the concept of a vendor managed program.
Okay.
And then what does that vendor managed program look like?
Yeah.
Would be something that would be taken care of at a later date.
And that's exactly what
Yeah.
we did last year.
Yeah.
We made
Same
a
thing.
general conceptual recommendation that
Right.
a plan be put in place. And then you had all the details that you presented up the line.
Talk it to death.
And you
Okay.
gave options, I believe,
There was?
of different
Yeah.
ways to do it.
Yep.
So I'll make that motion that we make that general conceptual recommendation again this year.
Mary Lou seconds. Any discussion on this? Mr. Meadows?
Yes, sir. I would recommend
Come on up.
You got it.
somehow. I would recommend somehow to where you would do include the neighborhood access points. Because basically at every single neighborhood access point is a vendor zone.
Yes.
And it's a large vendor zone or a small vendor zone or so forth. So, in your planning off, even if you do like tracks that you bid out, a vendor can actually have a regional site and the neighborhood site because he's still taking care of the guests that are coming from the houses or from wherever else on the beach.
I completely
And
agree.
they can put a box in that vendor zone to store equipment and also keep all that stuff, the rest of the stuff
That would
off
be
the tow
better
they
than
do.
what- yeah.
That you can regulate what goes on in those areas and they can be held responsible for it at all times.
Great.
And
I agree.
Brian, if there's,
Stick with recommendations. I'm just saying I would stick with recommendations to come from Kellenberger and that exploration.
yeah. And I would say, Brian, if there's, since this is a sticking point, if there's anything that can be done creatively to prohibit a monopoly by a single vendor or a few single vendors, then that'd be great. I support that. So we can have more successful businesses, small businesses out there.
You got that, Stace?
So I think what y'all said is that consider a managed vendor program at public beaches.
Yes, correct.
Correct, conceptually. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, ladies, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, Dune Lakes, you got 2 minutes.
Yeah, really quick update. I don't have one on the for sale signs. Nothing else has come up, and I'm not pursuing that personally. So I'm just hoping it'll bubble up and get done eventually. But on the coastal dune lake bridges, the last time we talked, I said that we were looking at doing a beta sort of pilot project at Seahorse Circle in Dune Allen. The Big Redfish Bridge project is coming up so quickly that the Public Works Department is adding 2 alternates to the bid, whatever requirements, for wooden guardrails, just like the ones at Pilcher Park, instead of the metal guardrails they're using, and staining the concrete floor and walls of the bridges a color, probably to match the wood that might be around it, if it's wooden guardrails, wooden pedestrian bridge for those that have them, so that it kind of blends and becomes more uniform looking with the pedestrian bridges and the natural surroundings around them. So they think in October that they will bring those bids to the Board of County Commissioners, and they will have to decide whether to spend the extra money on the aesthetic improvements or not. So that's where that stands, and it took a lot of work just to get those add alternates into the bid package. But if you have an interest in seeing that happen or know people that might, I would encourage them to watch the BCC agendas for that Big Redfish Lake Bridge bid decision-making process on the agenda, and come out and verbally or either write your commissioners or call or email to encourage them to provide that funding to make those bridges look better than they do. And it would be this, we're just looking at Big Redfish. They'll put it out there. If it works, they can consider it for all other bridges in the future, and they can also easily retrofit existing bridges with these 2 applications. And they're not very expensive. They don't add a whole lot of cost. That's all I have.
Okay, for sale and for sale.
I don't have an update on that. I just brought it to everybody's attention that it was coming up, and I hope somebody takes it and runs with it one day.
I just want to bring up, under sign control, under our ordinance as it stands, we have illegal signs everywhere. If we got rid of all the feather signs and the sandwich boards that are illegal, because when BP oil hit, the county said, okay, go ahead, put them out. We're done with that. If we got rid of all the sandwich boards, I think we'd be a whole lot prettier. That and the wind feathers. I report the wind feathers and the balloons all the time. Code enforcement does nothing about it, and they're out there. If the county were to enforce...
When you say complain, do you fill out a formal complaint form?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's
There's
not
one for
TDC,
yoga on North Spooky that's been there for 2 years. What's that? Yes, but I'm talking about the sandwich boards that everybody has out. If they're prohibited signs, they're not allowed. But when BP oil hit, the county said, well, okay, we'll go ahead and allow them. Because I've managed 5 offices at one time, and they said yes to one and no to another, which, started me getting involved with the county. But I think if we were to clean up the signs that are not allowed right now, I think it would look a whole lot better.
Are the signs illegal right now?
Yeah.
That's not TDC code, is it? Isn't that
No, ma'am. It's
regular code?
what we call street side code enforcement, or the planning department code enforcement.
Yeah, that's not the...
But they have a process. They have a process, and they're complaint driven. They require you to fill out a complaint form, and then I believe they extinguish cases based on as the complaints are received, and I'm assuming they group them in location zones. You know what I mean?
I've had a visitation from the lady at a business that I used to own, and we made the modifications that she recommended and didn't get a ticket. But I don't think it's our job to regulate private signage on private property. Is it?
Well, it's not on private property; it's in the road right of way. But the other thing, it's in the road right of way signage they're talking about. So we have different areas of the code that address that. One of them is the scenic corridor code, chapter 13, and it expressly has what is allowed, what's not allowed. The other thing too is street side code enforcement operates in a traditional property-based code enforcement manner, which requires notification of non-compliant behavior, a reasonable amount of time to cure, and then a remanding to the code board if the problem does not go away. And so we, operate on a instant citation type
Right.
situation to modify behavior. And so, what you're maybe experiencing is they are getting action against them as noticed, and they pull the sign in, and they have then corrected the problem, and they put it back out. So, but I would encourage you to talk with Bill Williams, with
He's a code man.
code enforcement guy,
Okay.
to inquire as to, how they do it, why they do it, and any specific issues, locations you have.
Well, it's specific that says the size of the sign can't be more than 6 square feet, and a lot of those surfboards renting for their rent, they're too big.
Yep.
And nobody's telling them that sign's too big, it needs to be smaller. And if we had controlled it, it wouldn't be out of hand like it is right now, because I agree there's too many. But my broker took down every big sign that we had that was not in compliance when I started talking about this, so all of our signs are back to little signs.
Most complaints and subsequent behavior change is generated within the industry.
Yes.
A lot of it. And just technically, unless something has changed and I wasn't aware of it, a few years ago, for scenic corridors, code enforcement did become proactive.
Yeah.
It does not require a complaint. Just now, staffing wise, levels wise, and things like that, but they
Definitely
don't
a
have to
question
have a
for Bill
complaint.
Williams.
They can proactively enforce code.
William Williams.
Is there any?
Bill Williams.
I know that number.
He's your
It's
man.
in my speed. Is there any way that we can request from the TDC funding to restore the Grayton Beach Trail with as many people as visited the Grayton Beach State Park? That trail is completely destroyed. Completely.
Which trail are you talking about?
The trail that goes under the pine trees.
It goes where?
Yes. The Grayton Beach Trail that goes through the pine trees
You mean on the park property?
on park property.
No, that's park money.
Right, but the TDC paid for a whole bunch of people to fill that park all summer. And with so many people influxing that park, that trail is,
Oh, you mean with the free parking?
oh yeah.
Are you talking about the trail that runs around the backside of Western Lake?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I hiked it with my granddaughter, my
But doesn't
dog.
the state have
And it's
to
my
do that?
favorite trail. No, but I mean with
We
all
could
the-
request it of the state.
We can request it from the TDC. The TD funds state parks all the time. It's just ours.
Yeah, I think it would have to be a request from the state park system for some assistance. And then, there'd be a lot of discussion on, did the free parking generate trail use or beach use? What was the percentage and all that? I mean, but I think it would be, if there was any funding from the TDC towards that, it would be from a request from the state park system for assistance. I don't think it should come from this committee to say, hey, let's go ask State Park if they need money.
Okay.
So maybe get with the
I just know that they need money, because I can tell you.
Yeah, and
The
we've
bathrooms,
offered
they're trying to
offered
get money
money
from
to
the
them,
friends for the
in the
bathrooms.
form of other things, but I would
needs to come
I
from
would
them.
think that if they came to us, that would be the consideration.
Oh,
Is there any way we can fund some money to repair the seawall at Kellogg Park?
There is. We actually have some money in the budget in 2018 to do some minor repairs.
Okay.
We had additionally put in some money to build the community center, but our budget didn't balance, and so the large projects came out, and they will be looked at in future years. But we do have, I want to say, $50,000 in there to do some repairs to the bayside portion of that park.
Thank you.
And one of it will be repairs to that small boat launch area that has that seawall that's somewhat deteriorated.
Yeah, okay.
I'm
We're going to move
envisioning.
to Scenic Gulf Drive now. Everybody okay with that?
what's that?
I said we're going to move to Scenic Gulf Drive now for a few minutes. Is it okay?
Are you done?
Okay. Brian, I sent you a message earlier in the week that in the last meeting in July, you said that Mr. Urban was going to get with me and we were going to ride Scenic Gulf Drive to talk about the placement of the benches, trash cans, et cetera,
Yes, sir.
et cetera. Well, I've never heard from Mr. Urban.
Okay, Mr. Urban was very busy this year. Things have loosened up now. I predict that he will get with you shortly.
Like right now?
Josh Irvin, ERVIN, If you check your email, there'll be one apologizing for not getting up with you and a request to schedule that. My apologies.
What I want to know is, what about the procurement of this equipment? We talked about that, decisions were made, and you said, so where are we on that?
As soon as we can get some locations, we'll get them in place.
So we have the equipment.
We have money for procurement of benches and garbage cans, yes.
Okay. The last item is Amalfi, and I overheard the conversation during the break, but the point that I want to make is that all of Scenic Gulf Drive converted from perpendicular parking to parallel parking to prevent the huge amount of traffic being interrupted as cars go in and out. I think it's very important that whatever the design is, that we design it so that it goes deep enough back to the edge of the dunes to allow cars to pull in, pull out, and go out into the traffic without backing out.
Correct. If we do head-in parking, it will be done so that the person pulling out does not have to pull into the line of traffic.
Great. That's all I have. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, it took me 3 hours to get there. But
yes, ma'am.
I'm Kay Minshew. I'm the president of the MINCHEW. I'm president of the Amalfi Coast Homeowners Association. So, and I listened to the meeting in July, but wanted to make certain I was at the meeting here today, and was just checking to see if we have any timetable for when we'll start seeing any activity.
Yes, ma'am. So this Tuesday we'll get approval from the BCC to engage the architectural engineering firm to start design permitting process. That will proceed into a conceptual design that is presented at a public workshop, and from there we'll take in public input, get approved from BCC on how to proceed, and design development through the next 4 to 6 months after that. Permitting in another 4 to 6 months. Construction probably in late 2018, open for the 2019 spring season.
And how will we know about the public workshop?
Well, BCC asked us to make sure that HOA is informed personally,
Okay.
so you'll receive a personal invite from me,
Okay.
as well as we'll share information with your HOA, with you as a representative, that you can distribute to your members.
Okay, good. And then the house that y'all bought on the next to the beach.
Yes, ma'am.
Any idea of when activity will start on that?
As soon as we figure out, that property will be included in the overall design scheme. And we'll, so we won't tear that down until we have a design in place and we start construction.
Okay, very good. And there was a rough couple of weeks there with lots of trash and things, but it looks like that's back up to speed. And
Good, we appreciate it. We try to be quick in correcting any deficiencies.
And it looks like that's happened, so.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You got any issues, contact Josh Irvin.
He's available on Scenic Gulf.
Thank you, Ms. Minshew. Thank you, Ms. Minshew.
I'm just kidding. You can contact
Okay,
Josh.
does anybody else have anything?
Will do.
All right, so motion, or we can't motion anything, party's over.
Bye-bye.